under a nationwide state of emergency. The country remains on high alert as the United States warns the Russians are ready for a full-scale, imminent invasion. Ukraine's President Zelensky told his nation tonight that Russian leadership has approved an incursion. And he tried to call Vladimir Putin today, but was met with ominous silence. We are now awaiting an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council, an open session tonight, convening at the request of Ukraine. It's scheduled for a half an hour or so from now, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, and we will, of course, monitor that. We'll go there once it begins. Here's the latest assessment from the Pentagon.
Russian forces continue to assemble closer to the border. And put themselves in an advanced stage of readiness to act virtually any time now. We believe that they are ready. We all hope that we're wrong about this, but every indication we have is that he is poised to attack Ukraine again, and this time with what could be significant military force.
New satellite imagery shows a number of new Russian deployments, particularly in and around the eastern border of Ukraine. One battle group is deployed approximately 9 miles east of the border. Many are within 10 miles of the country. Lines that continue for about 50 miles from the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. So that city in particular is of great concern because it's right up against the Russian border in the northeast. The Pentagon also believes additional Russian forces are moving into the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, two separatist-held areas in eastern Ukraine recognized as independent by Vladimir Putin on Monday. A senior U.S. defense official tells CNN Putin has 24 warships in the Black Sea. He has cruise missile capability, ballistic missile capability, armor, artillery, infantry, special forces, and only he knows the timing of his plan. But the White House has been trying to get ahead of him in recent days, revealing information about his plans, and believes Putin has been improvising and adopting as a result.
Our assessment is that President Putin did not expect the United States to have the level of information that we have, did not expect us to put out this amount of information that we have put out. And what we're seeing now, our assessment is that he is improvising, adapting, and we're having to respond and adapt his own actions to as we are responding to him.
The U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman told me this evening Putin is poised to launch a, quote, war of carnage that could leave thousands on both sides dead. This is clearly a very, very dire moment. We have global coverage on another very uncertain evening right now. We have live reports coming in from Ukraine, the White House, and of course the State Department. But let's begin with our chief international correspondent, Clarissa Ward. She's joining us from Kharkiv in Ukraine right now. Clarissa, how dramatically has the mood shifted in Ukraine tonight?
There's no question, Wolf. There has been a dramatic shift. This really feels now like a country that's holding its breath. I mean, just earlier today, the mayor of Kharkiv put out an announcement on Twitter telling people to stay calm, to stay unified, to keep going to work, saying that city services are still functioning. And yet when we arrived here late this evening, we found checkpoints going into the city. We also saw on our drive from Kiev a large convoy of Ukrainian military vehicles. But most strikingly, honestly, is the shift in tone, Wolf, from Ukraine's leadership. You heard President Zelensky there switching from Ukrainian to Russian and directly appealing to the Russian people to try to help avert this catastrophe, saying, you know, there's nearly 200,000 troops on this border, and your leadership has given them approval to cross in to Ukrainian territory, to cross in to another country country's territory. And so clearly we are in a very different situation now than we were before. As recently as just a few days ago, people here really didn't believe that this could actually happen. But now we're learning that the airspace, the Russians have closed the airspace to certain civilian aircraft in this part of the country. We know the Ukrainians have closed the airport here in Kharkiv. They've also closed 2 other airports. And I think there's a sense now of people just waiting to see what's going to happen. There isn't a state of alarm, as you can probably see behind me. It's the middle of the night. The streets are quiet. But it will be very interesting to see what tomorrow brings. Will you start to see more preparations? Will you start to see people trying to leave the city? As I mentioned before, up until this point, Ukraine's leaders have really tried to tamp down any sense of panic. We heard President Zelensky saying as recently as last week that they didn't even believe it was possible to launch a full-scale invasion with the amount of troops that Russia had amassed at the border. There has clearly been a dramatic shift in tone and in the calculations that Ukraine's leaders are making. And so the question now becomes, is there anything that can be done to avert this catastrophe and to try to turn this situation around, Wolf?
It really looks ominous. As I mentioned, Clarissa, you're there in Kharkiv. The U.S. Had warned of particular concern for the city, that city where you are. What more can you tell us about what you're actually seeing right now on the ground?
So on the ground, Wolf, you're seeing, as you can probably see behind me, it's incredibly quiet. It's the middle of the night, but this is a city of 1.4 million people, Wolf, and it is pretty extraordinary to be in a situation where we could be potentially, or it certainly seems we're closer to an actual imminent invasion of some sort or incursion of some sort, and we don't yet see any mass panic. We don't certainly even see any evidence of evacuations. We know that there are public bomb shelters, one of them not far from here. Everyone very clearly hoping that those will not be needed. But when you look at those satellite images that you mentioned, just 10 miles on the other side of the border, so 50 miles from here, let's say, it clearly shows that things are moving in a very ominous direction indeed. And so the question now becomes, at what point does Ukraine's leadership start to instate, we know there's that state of emergency, and we've heard from the mayor of Kyiv saying that, that people shouldn't go out after a certain time, they should have their documents on them, and laying out a raft of kind of rules and regulations in this state of emergency. We haven't really seen that playing out here yet. And given the fact that this city in particular seems to be, at least in the view of intelligence coming out of the U.S., on a sort of heightened state of alert, it'll be very important to see how this local municipality even starts to try to implement some measures to protect the people of this city, Wolf.
I want you to stand by, Clarissa. We're going to get back to you as we learn more. Stand by. Right now, though, I want to check in over at the U.S. State Department. Kylie Atwood is there for us tonight. So what's the word there at this hour, Kylie?
Well, listen, Wolf, what we've been seeing from U.S. officials over the last few hours is them describing the alarming current force posture of Russian troops, right? Saying essentially that they are as ready to go into Ukraine as they have ever been. One senior Defense Department official saying that Russia has close to 100% of the forces that the Pentagon believes that it needs to carry out a full-blown invasion into Ukraine. And 80% of those forces are in a posture of ready to go. So that is where we are at right now. U.S. officials are looking at what they see on the ground, and they see that Russia is barreling forth towards an invasion. I want us to listen to how the Secretary of State described what Russian forces have been doing in the last few days.
Everything we've seen over the last 24 to 48 hours has Russia putting the final touches on having its forces in place across all of Ukraine's borders, to the north, to the east, to the south, to be ready for a full-on invasion.
And one thing that we are seeing the State Department do this hour, Wolf, in real time is call out what the Russians are doing with these false flags. We saw the State Department spokesperson Ned Price say that there is no evidence that Ukrainians are going after any of the separatists in those eastern regions, those eastern areas of Ukraine. Of course, that comes as the Russians are claiming that the Kremlin has been asked to go and send forces into that area because the separatists need those forces to defend against Ukrainian aggressions. The State Department saying that is just plain false, and they're doing it in real time. It is significant because what they are saying is that we expected this, and now, as we are seeing it play out, we are calling it out for what it is: disinformation, a false pretext.
Kylie, as you know, we're waiting for this emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council this hour. Can anything come of that realistically at this late point?
It's a good question. I think it's a significant moment for the international community to come once again together and condemn what Russia is doing here as they maintain this aggressive force posture and could potentially carry out this invasion. But this is more symbolic than it is anything else. It is more political than it is anything else, because what we could see from the United Nations tonight are a tremendous number of countries coming out against Russia. But there is no indication that as they have done that over the last few days in these UN meetings, that it has changed anything about what Russia is planning here.
What is the U.S., Kylie, bracing for in terms of humanitarian assistance, the humanitarian impact if Russia were to launch a full-scale invasion?
Wolf, rest assured, it is going to be an incredible humanitarian crisis. You heard that earlier this afternoon when you spoke with the Deputy Secretary of State. She was saying that this wouldn't only be a war that was carried out by Russia's choice, but it would also be a war of carnage. And we know that U.S. intelligence assessments put the number of deaths of civilians in Ukraine, if there is an all-out invasion, at tens of thousands. We also know, the Deputy Secretary of State talking about this as well tonight, that there would be a tremendous refugee crisis created, that there could be up to 5 million refugees that pour over Ukraine's borders and into Europe. So this won't only impact Ukraine, but it'll also impact the rest of Europe.
Yeah, millions of refugees that would spill over first into Poland and then other European countries. Kylie, I want you to stand by as we await this emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. Right now, I want to turn over to the White House. MJ Lee is on the scene for us over there. So what are you hearing, MJ, over there?
Well, Wolf, there is certainly tonight a recognition at the White House of the real gravity of the situation. And really, over the last 48 hours, we have seen the urgency in the tone from U.S. officials, everyone from the president on down, incredibly intensifying. Of course, it started with the president saying yesterday that an invasion has begun. And then tonight, from the Pentagon, they said that they are ready to go, referring to Russian troops and suggesting that a full invasion was imminent. And since then, we have really seen a rapid rollout of sanctions against Russia. We have heard White House officials saying that more sanctions could definitely be on the way. And tonight, we should note that White House officials and U.S. officials definitely took note of this dramatic speech from the Ukrainian president. And one of the reasons that it was so significant is because this is a leader, as U.S. officials know very well, in the past, at times, has been reticent to even talk realistically about the possibility of a full-scale Russian invasion, in part because we know he didn't want to set off panic among his own people. So the tone of his voice in the remarks that he made as he essentially sort of pleaded for peace and spoke directly to the Russian people, that was something that U.S. officials certainly took note of. And if you need a sign of just how much this is at the top of the president's agenda, we got his schedule for tomorrow, and one of the first things that he will be doing is going to the Situation Room and convening a meeting, a virtual meeting with G7 leaders. So again, this is a rapidly evolving situation that U.S. officials are watching very, very closely, Wolf.
Yep, as they should. MJ Lee at the White House will get back to you as well. Once again, we're awaiting this emergency UN Security Council meeting on this crisis in Ukraine as we monitor our live signals from inside Ukraine right now. And as we wait, we're going to walk you through what a full-scale Russian invasion could look like with one of our top military analysts standing by. We'll be right back.
And a little bit of chicken fried, cold beer on a Friday night, a pair of jeans that fit just right, and the radio.
Get 5 boneless wings for $1 with any handcrafted burger, only at Applebee's.
Selling a home is expensive and stressful, so we set out to create a better home selling experience with a network of the most successful real estate agents in America that'll sell your home for as little as a 2% commission.
The icing on the cake with the Ideal Agent was that we saved $12,000 in commission.
They were so stress-free. The whole process was amazing, and I would definitely recommend them.
We are not a discount brokerage. These are top local agents that'll get you the best results.
Maybe we missed the sign for the highway.
We didn't miss the sign.
Oh my God!
Where are we? So you're telling me I'm in a mystical town I can't leave?
These woods are not safe after dark.
I can still hear those things whispering. We are stuck.
I'm gonna find us a way out of this place.
Men put their skin through a lot, day in, day out. That's why Dove Men Body Wash has skin-strengthening nutrients and moisturizers that help rebuild your skin. Dove Men Plus Care, smoother, healthier skin with every shower.
Certified turbocharger, suspension and fuel injection.
Translation, certified goosebumps.
Certified from headlamp to tailpipe.
That's certified head turns.
And it's all backed by our unlimited mileage warranty.
That means unlimited peace of mind. Mercedes-Benz certified pre-owned. Translation, the Mercedes of your dreams is closer than you think.
Hey businesses, you all deserve something epic. So we're giving every business our best deals on every iPhone, including the iPhone 13 Pro with 5G.
That's the one with the amazing camera.
Yep, every business deserves it. Like ones that reopened. Hey, we have an appointment. And every new business that just opened.
Like aromatherapy rugs.
I'll take one in blue, please.
It's not complicated. AT&T is giving new and existing business customers our best deals on every iPhone.
I've traveled every road in this here land. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. Of travel I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. I've been to Pittsburgh, Parkersburg, Gravelburg, Colorado, Ellen City, Cedar City, Dodge City, what a pity. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere.
As a struggling actor, I need all the breaks that I can get. At Liberty Mutual.
Cut.
Line.
Cut. Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance so you only pay for what you need.
Cut. Liberty. Am I allowed to riff? What if I come out of the water? Liberty Bibbity.
Cut. We'll dub it.
Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance so you only pay for what you need.
Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
I knew I had to take charge of my life. I didn't recognize myself. Now with Jenny Craig, I've lost 27 pounds and 3.5 inches.
Introducing the revolutionary Max Up, the one-stop, most effective weight loss solution. Limited time offer. Join now.
Tonight, Ukraine is bracing for what could be a full-scale invasion by Russia. The U.S. believes it's imminent. President Zelensky also says Vladimir Putin has ordered an invasion. Let's go live to CNN's Matthew Chance. He's in the capital of Kyiv for us. President Zelensky, Matthew, as you know, said he tried to call Putin today, was met with silence. Was this a last-ditch attempt to avert a full-scale war?
I think it was, yes, and it didn't just end with a phone call, because Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, also posted an address on social media in which, for a period of it, he spoke in Russian, and he spoke directly to Russian people, saying, look, you've been told, and it was a very emotional appeal. He said, look, you've been told that Ukrainians need to be freed, but we're already free in this country. He said, you've been told that, you know, we hate your culture, we hate Russian culture, but of course, how can you hate any culture? He said that there are differences between the two countries, but there was no reason for them to be enemies. And so it was this, you know, as I say, very emotional, direct appeal to Russia, you know, having failed to speak directly to the leadership, to get them to call whatever they've got planned off. And so it does indicate how seriously and how tense the situation is here. That's sort of reaffirmed by the fact that a state of emergency has been imposed inside Ukraine across the vast majority of the country, obviously not in the rebel provinces that have been recognized by Russia now. And that means that there's a curfew from 11 o'clock at night. It means there's extra security outside key government buildings and transportation hubs. And it also means that people who are signed up for the reserves in the military are not allowed to leave the country in case they're actually needed to fight what could be an extraordinarily bloody war. The big concern at the moment, Wolf, is the region in the east of the country of Donbass, where the rebel groups there that have recently been recognized by Russia have been claiming there's been an upsurge of shelling by Ukrainian government military forces into that area, particularly into Donetsk, one of the main rebel cities there. And they've appealed directly to Moscow for military assistance to help them defend, as they would characterize it, against that military attack by the Ukrainian military. Of course, the Ukrainians deny there's any such attack underway, and they deny they're planning to take back that region by military force. But if the Kremlin grant that assistance, it could open the floodgates to thousands of Russian troops who are gathered near the border of Ukraine right now to go into that region and for that invasion that's been widely tipped by US intelligence and others to take place very soon. Just very quickly, we're up on the top of the roof of the hotel in central Kiev that we're staying in. And of course, the US intelligence has been passed on to the Ukrainians is that there could be, you know, imminent attacks occurring in places all over the country, including here in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. And you know, this is the sort of panorama we've got from this view from the south to the east, all the way to the north. Of course, Russia is in that general direction there. To the sort of northeast of here. And so, you know, we're keeping a close eye on the situation. And I can tell you, Ukrainian officials that I've spoken to tonight are saying that they are also sort of bracing for the possibility of there being some kind of attack, perhaps here, perhaps elsewhere in the country, by Russia possibly in the hours ahead, possibly in the days ahead.
We will stay in very, very close touch with you, Matthew. Be careful over there. As you learn more, we'll, of course, get right back to you. Right now, Ukraine remains on very high alert as Russian forces continue to amass at its borders. President Zelensky now warns an invasion could be triggered at any moment. The latest satellite imagery shows new deployments northeast of Ukraine in Russia, just miles from the Ukrainian border. For the latest on what these military moves could mean, CNN military analyst, retired U.S. Army Major General Spider Marks is joining us right now. General, the satellite imagery shows that this new buildup is within only 10 miles of the Ukrainian border and less than 50 miles from the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. What does that tell you?
Yeah, well, I tell you, Wolf, what we're seeing as a result of the great work by the CNN correspondents, commercially available imagery that you've shared, the analysis that the administration has released, and then certainly open sources of intelligence really shows us that there is a significant buildup of forces right there. We've seen the cell phone footage, we've seen the imagery, and what that tells you is there is a real possibility, only 30 miles from the border to the second largest city in Ukraine of Kharkiv, that forces could come across here at any time. And let's be frank, the forces have been available over the past couple of weeks, could have initiated this. And what you see President Putin doing is decreasing his risk. He's going through risk mitigation measures right now, which increases his logistics, his medical supplies, et cetera, and additional forces. But additionally, we've seen lots of footage of activity down here, which could provide movement into this area, which is where the separatists have been for the last 8 years, fighting alongside Russian soldiers. And here is the rest of the Donbass region. So here's what I think is going to probably happen. Movement will occur here if it hasn't already. Additional movement into this area would be significant military operations. There would be killing. There would be blood that would be as a result of these engagements. Simultaneously, the commander on the ground now has an option to put these Ukrainian forces in a vice, coming from this direction and coming from this direction. But also bear in mind, it gives him an option. This is the second largest city in Ukraine, as I indicated, which means they've got roads, they've got networks, they've got the ability to move stuff around. They could come in here and also threaten Kiev because there are also forces up here as well.
Yeah, there are forces all around Ukraine right now, maybe 190,000 Russian troops. General, we'll get back to you as well. Thank you very much for that explanation. Any moment now, the United Nations Security Council will begin its emergency meeting on the crisis. We're watching for that meeting to begin. Stand by. You're looking at live pictures coming in from the UN right now. There's the UN Secretary General. Only Vladimir Putin himself knows his next move, but we're going to bring in someone very familiar with how he operates for some fresh insight on Putin's thinking. The former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, there he is, Bill Taylor. He's standing by live. We will assess right after the break.
Realtor.com's draw and map feature helped us find what we wanted, where we wanted.
We could finally buy our first big boy house.
Big boy house.
Big boy foyer.
Big boy marble.
A big boy quartz.
What?
Realtor.com to each their home.
Wasn't me.
You're never responsible for unauthorized purchases on your Discover card.
Eliminating grays is as easy as combing your hair. With Just For Men Easy Comb in Color. Just twist and comb. Getting natural looking results.
Let's get this meeting started.
Has never been easier. The most men trust Just For Men.
King C. Gillette is a complete lineup of tools and facial hair care products. This is the Style Master, designed to style your stubble in one stroke. A pivoting metal head that defines every edge, and 3 comb lengths for added versatility. One tool that helps you choose, change, and master your style. King C. Gillette.
Where I live.
Migraine attacks? Qulipta can help prevent migraine attacks. It can't prevent triggers like stress or changes in weather. You can't prevent what's going on outside. That's why Qulipta helps what's going on inside. Qulipta is a pill, gets right to work to prevent migraine attacks and keeps them away over time. Qulipta blocks CGRP, a protein believed to be a cause of migraine attacks. Qulipta is a preventive treatment for episodic migraine. Most common side effects are nausea, constipation, and tiredness. Learn how AbbVie can help you save on Qulipta.
Do you think any of us will look back in our lives and regret the things we didn't buy? Or the places we didn't go?
It was almost never about food. I think it was about Tony learning how to be a better person.
There's never been a better time to switch to Spectrum Mobile. You could save up to 60% on your monthly mobile bill. Plus, there are no added taxes, hidden fees, and no contracts. Use the Spectrum Mobile Savings Calculator, and in 3 easy steps, you'll instantly see how much money you could save by switching to Spectrum Mobile. See for yourself. Visit spectrummobile.com/save today.
Ready to save on Hondas? Save thousands with 0.9% financing on your favorite Hondas. Or get payments from $209 a month. There has never been a better time to trade for a new Honda. Get more for your trade now than ever before. Save on best-selling Hondas today. with 0.9% financing or payments from $209 a month. Trade today at Ron Norris Honda and Space Coast Honda.
I'm Erin Burnett in Ukraine, and this is CNN.
Closed captioning brought to you by Mesobook.com.
We offer a free book on mesothelioma. Call for the free book and receive so much more. Call 1-800-831-3700.
We're waiting for the start of the United Nations Security Council. They're meeting an emergency session right now. We expect to hear from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He will, we're told, open up this session. We'll also hear from the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. The Russian ambassador will speak. The Ukrainian ambassador will have extensive coverage of that. This is a critically important meeting. We'll get a sense of what's going on right now. At the same time, earlier tonight, there was an extremely somber message from the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Watch this.
Нам не нужна война.
We have no need for another Cold War, or a bloody war, or a hybrid war. But if we are attacked militarily, if they try to take away our freedom, our lives, our children's lives, we will defend ourselves. When you attack, you will see our faces and not our spines, our faces.
All right, let's discuss with the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us at a critically sensitive, very delicate moment right now. As you heard, President Zelensky warning Russia, warning that Russia has ordered an invasion and that the trigger could come at any moment now. How do you interpret this dramatic shift from the Ukrainian leader?
So, Wolf, I think it has become clear to President Zelensky that President Putin could well do what he's been threatening to do. President Putin has clearly been trying to rattle President Zelensky. He's trying to intimidate, probably trying to intimidate President Biden as well. And as you saw tonight, President Zelensky is not rattled. He's grim. He's determined. I was in his office 3 weeks ago. He was focused at the time. He wasn't as grim and determined and a bit pessimistic as he is today. Back then, he was still of the view that there was not enough forces on his border to do a major invasion. Well, there's now enough forces on the border to do a major invasion, and that has gotten to President Zelensky. He has not folded. He has not conceded. He has not backed down, but he is now worried.
As he should be. This could be very, very bloody. The U.S. Deputy Secretary of State, Wendy Sherman, a woman you know, I know her as well, she told me earlier tonight that Putin has now closed the door to diplomacy. First of all, do you agree? Has every diplomatic option for all practical purposes, Ambassador, been exhausted?
Well, if it's not impossible that President Putin could have a change of heart, it's probably unlikely. But if he wanted to avoid the bloody carnage that you just described, bloody on the Russian side, it will clearly be terrible for Ukraine and Ukrainians, military and civilian. But there will also be many Russian soldiers killed. Well, President Putin has not had to face a large number of Russian soldiers killed in the previous battles, in the previous operations in Ukraine. He went into Crimea in 2014 without firing a shot. He has been in Donbass for 8 years, and just 2 nights ago he went into Donbass under total Russian control, so he didn't lose anyone there either. He indeed has lost a couple of soldiers, Russian soldiers, during the 8 years of battle, but he's suppressed that. He has tried to hide that. President Putin is worried about Russian soldiers dying, and they will die in large numbers if they go in and attack the Ukrainian military. He's got to worry about that, and he could have a change of heart.
Well, we can only hope. What do you believe, Ambassador, is Putin's ultimate goal right now? Does he want, for example, to topple President Zelensky? Does he want to occupy the whole of Ukraine? And then what?
Well, I don't think he wants to occupy the whole of Ukraine if he doesn't have to. Indeed, that's probably an impossible task for the forces that he's got. He needs many more forces to occupy the entire country, a country the size of Texas. He can't do that with 200,000 soldiers. He can't do that. What he wants, though, you got the right question. What he wants is control of Ukraine one way or the other. He thought he had control of Ukraine through the Minsk process by establishing these little proxy puppets, Luhansk and Donetsk, Donbass, in the body of Ukraine. And from those puppets controlling the body of Ukraine, he could control Ukraine's foreign policy. That's not working. That didn't work for him. So now he has to look for another way to get that control. His ultimate goal is control of Ukraine, bringing Ukraine back under Russian control.
The 8,970.
President Biden, as you know, has responded with sanctions in step with other Western allies. But what more needs to happen, Ambassador, if we see a full-scale Russian invasion?
28th of February 2014 from the permanent representative.
Every sanction in the book, to include sanctioning the central bank of Russia. The SWIFT is not off the table. We should seize assets, everything that we can do to cripple that economy. Sadly, it has to affect Russian citizens, has to affect people around Putin. He has to be sanctioned as well. This is a war criminal. He has to be brought to justice in some way. That has got to be clear to him that this is a bad mistake.
We're monitoring this UN Security Council meeting. Once it gets to the gist, to the important part, we'll of course have some live coverage of that. So stand by, Ambassador. The UN ambassador is warning that this could create some 5 million refugees out of Ukraine. What will that mean for Poland and other countries in Europe that will have to absorb these Ukrainian refugees?
Of course, it will be a big challenge. We've seen in the past where refugees from other parts of the world have come into Europe and caused problems, political problems, humanitarian problems. This will be the same way. This, however, Ukraine is close to Europe. Indeed, it's part of Europe. Ukraine is historically European. Large parts of Ukraine have always been Europe.
All right, hold on a moment.
Hold
on a moment, Ambassador. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is speaking.
In the meeting of the General Assembly. But of course, it wouldn't make any sense to bother you reading again the same text that I'm sure you are all aware of. In between, during the day, a number of events took place, and with your permission, Mr. President, I would like to ask Ms. Rosemary Di Carlo to be able to brief you on those events. But simultaneously, the day was full of rumors and indications that an offensive against Ukraine was imminent. In the recent past, there were several situations with similar indications, similar rumors. And I never believed in them, convinced that nothing serious would happen. I was wrong. And I would like not to be wrong again today. So, if indeed an operation is being prepared, I have only one thing to say from the bottom of my heart. President Putin, stop your troops from attacking the Ukraine. Give peace a chance. Too many people have already died. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the Secretary General for his introductory remarks.
All right, so there you have strong, very strong words from Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General. Give peace a chance. Too many people have died. He says he was always pretty upbeat that this moment would not occur. He said, I was wrong. And he said to President Putin, stop your troops. Bill Taylor, you've watched a lot of UN meetings, UN Security Council meetings. This meeting with the Secretary General opening up with these strong words, it underscores how dangerous this moment is right now.
Throughout the day, we've seen disturbing...
It does, Wolf. It's a very dangerous moment. It is sad that the Security Council can't do anything about it. One would have hoped years ago when the Security Council, when the UN was put together, that this organization would step in somehow and stop this kind of war. But it's clearly not. The Russian is actually in the chair right now. The Russian is in the chair of the Security Council right now. And so the UN Security Council cannot really do anything other than just bring attention to this crime that's about to be committed by one country, one big, powerful country, against its neighbor, against its sovereign neighbor.
I'm anxious to hear what the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, is going to say. She's there, and she's going to be delivering a major statement on behalf of the United States government, on behalf of President Biden. We'll be listening very carefully to her words, right?
We absolutely will. The Security Council has met before. She gave a great speech. Secretary Blinken gave a great speech at the Security Council as well. They have put the Russians on notice, and yet the Russians seem oblivious. The Russians seem not to hear. The Russians seem intent on controlling Ukraine, on dominating Ukraine, on bringing Ukraine back under their control without regard to international law, without regard to the UN Charter, without regard to any of the commitments that the Russians have made to the Ukrainians and to the international community over the years. Without any regard for that, they seem to be poised to invade.
All right, we're going to continue to monitor this emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. Rosemary DiCarlo, the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs at the UN, is speaking. We'll monitor what she's saying. We'll wait for the U.S. ambassador to the UN to address the Security Council. Let's take a quick break, resume our special coverage right after this.
What makes my heart beat? Having everything I want in the place I love. Jamaica, heartbeat of the world. Let's go.
It's really been a gift having Mom live with us. But as a nurse, my training told me she needed more help than I could provide. So I connected with a place for Mom. My senior living advisor understood our unique situation. She quickly recommended communities and set up tours. A Place for Mom helped us get to a decision. And now, Mom is so well cared for.
Our service comes at no cost to your family. Connect with us today.
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol Turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Unlike regular turmeric supplements, Cunol's superior absorption helps me get the full benefits of turmeric. The brand I trust is Cunol.
Don't settle for products that give you a sort of white smile. Try Crest Whitening Emulsions for 100% whiter teeth. Its highly active peroxide droplets swipe on in seconds. Better, faster, 100% whiter teeth. Shop CrestWhiteSmile.com.
Come on, Percy.
Yeah, let's go. On a trip. Book with Priceline. You save more so you can woo more. Woo. Yeah, feel the savings. Priceline, every trip is a big deal.
Okay, let's talk about those changes to your financial plan.
Bill? Mary?
Hey, it's our former broker, Carl.
Carl, say hi to Nina, our Schwab financial consultant.
I know how difficult these calls can be.
Not with Schwab. Nina made it easier to set up our financial plan.
We can check in on it anytime.
It changes when our goals change.
Planning can't be that easy.
Actually, it can be, Carl.
Look forward to planning with Schwab.
I'm Lisa Ling, and you can watch new episodes of This Is Life on CNN.
And I'm Lisa Plus. You can stream every episode on CNN Plus.
Like when I hung out with outlaw bikers.
Lisa, it's immersive storytelling.
At Massey Services, when we say expect more and get it, it's a commitment to more than just termite protection.
More environmentally responsible solutions.
More security with an unlimited repair and retreatment guarantee without a deductible.
More coverage for the contents and structure of your home.
More attention to detail with our annual termite inspection.
And more peace of mind for you and your family. Guaranteed.
Massey Services. Expect more and get it.
It all begins when you wake up and you need the right morning team to help get your day started off the right way. Kirsten Delgado, Christian Brewy, Alexa Lorenzo, and Brian Shields. The Channel 9 Eyewitness News This Morning team. Tomorrow, starting at 4:30 a.m.
This week, Wheel gets into the Aloha spirit.
I love Hawaii week.
And it's a puzzle paradise.
Beaches.
Flip, flops,
volcanoes.
Wheel's on island time.
I'm wearing my casual tie tonight.
Wheel of Fortune, tomorrow at 7:30 on Channel 9.
CNN Special Report, The Alex Jones Story, Sunday at 9.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Major breaking news we're following right now. We're monitoring the UN Security Council emergency meeting underway. We anticipate that the U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, will be speaking momentarily, outlining the U.S. position as it unfolds right now, given the fact that U.S. officials believe that the Russians are now on the verge of launching a full-scale invasion. Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the U.S. Ambassador, is speaking.
And for your remarks tonight. Colleagues, a few moments ago, I spoke to President Biden, who asked me to convey in the strongest possible terms his and our steadfast support for Ukraine and support for the urgent meeting this Council has convened tonight. Furthermore, he asked me to share that the United States and our allies and partners will continue to respond to Russia's actions with unity, with clarity, and with conviction. We are here tonight because we believe, along with Ukraine, that a full-scale further invasion into Ukraine by Russia is imminent. Tonight, we're seeing the Russians close airspace, move troops into Donbass, and move forces into combat-ready positions. This is a perilous moment, and we're here for one reason and one reason only: to ask Russia to stop, return to your borders, send your troops and your tanks and your planes back to their barracks and hangars, and send your diplomats to the negotiating table. Back away from the brink before it is too late. Last week, the United States informed this Council and the world about what we expected to see unfold. We said that Russia would manufacture a pretext for an attack. We have since seen numerous false flag events staged along the lines of contact in Donbass. We said Russia would theatrically convene emergency meetings at the highest levels of the Russian government. We all saw this on Monday with the state televised Security Council meeting held by President Putin, an orchestrated moment in which the Russian government decided to recognize as, and I quote, independent states, unquote, sovereign territory of Ukraine controlled by Russia's proxies since 2014. They literally violated Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity on live television before the world. We said that false proclamations would come declaring Russia would need to defend Russian speakers in Ukraine. We got that and much more from President Putin's speech on Monday and during the speech of the Russian ambassador in the General Assembly today. No one could have predicted just how dangerous, inciting, and far-reaching President Putin's speech would be with Putin arguing for taking the world back in time to an era of empires and colonies. Finally, we said the attack would come next, that we could expect communications to be jammed, cyber attacks to shut down key Ukrainian institutions. Last week, we attributed to Russia denial of service attacks against Ukrainian banks, and we saw similar activity this morning targeting government sites as well. And in the last few hours, we have received very concerning reports of destructive malware placed on hundreds of computers and executed on at least some. After that, we said would come the bombs and missiles, the soldiers and the tanks. Already soldiers have been deployed to the occupied region of Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here tonight because we believe the rest is imminent. Now, over the past few weeks, Russia has called our predictions hysterical. Russia said we were lying. Russia said we were supplying the world with misinformation. Russia's diplomats even laughed in the face of the human suffering we were sounding the alarm about. But what we said would happen has come to pass for all the world to see. So let us be clear. All parties are not culpable here. There's no middle ground. Calling for both sides to de-escalate only gives Russia a pass. Russia is the aggressor here. Russia's attack on Ukraine is tantamount to an attack on the UN and every member state in the chamber tonight. The Security Council is charged with adjudicating threats to peace and security. Russia is bypassing it entirely and taking matters into its own hands. And that undermines the institution. It undermines everyone who participates in it. The United States, Ukraine, its allies, and partners across Europe, UN officials, every other member of the Security Council, we have all repeatedly implored Russia to engage at the diplomatic table. Those calls were not heard. Instead, tonight, Russia has brought its people, the Ukrainian people, and the world to the brink of a conflict that will produce an untold amount of human suffering. I said it in the General Assembly this morning, and I'll say it again tonight. Everyday Russians should be asking themselves right now how many Russian lives Putin will sacrifice for his cynical ambitions. Responsible members of this Security Council will stand together, and we will stand with Ukraine. And we will do so despite a reckless, irresponsible permanent member of the Security Council abusing its powers to attack its neighbor and subvert the UN and our international system. This morning in the General Assembly, we saw dozens of leaders from across the globe stand up to defend the UN Charter and Ukraine against Russia's brazen attacks. We were proud to stand with them. Today, I had the opportunity to meet with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Kuleba. And many of you were in the General Assembly Hall this morning when Foreign Minister Kuleba received enthusiastic and overwhelming applause after his remarks. Since he could not be here this evening, I would like to conclude by echoing his words. This morning, he warned us all that, quote, no one will be able to sit out this crisis if President Putin decides that he can move forward with this aggression against Ukraine. Your governments and your people will face painful consequences together with our government and our people, unquote. He is right. History tells us that. and we must confront this threat head on in this council, in the UN, and in our capitals. The people of Ukraine are counting on us. Let's not let them down. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Well, we're going to continue to monitor the United Nations Security Council emergency meeting, but we just heard some very powerful words from Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. She did not mince any words. She said that a full-scale further invasion of Ukraine by Russia is now imminent. She said this is a perilous moment indeed. Fareed Zakaria is with us. Bill Taylor is still with us. Fareed, let me get your thoughts right now. It looks like a full-scale war, if it already hasn't started, is about to begin.
Well, that's certainly the signs are pointing in that direction. And as Ambassador Thomas pointed out, Greenfield Thomas pointed out, U.S. intelligence in this regard, on this issue, in this period, has been unerringly accurate. The fact that the Russians have closed down the flight space is one more sign. What we do not know is what the ultimate aim of this military intervention will be, this phase of it. Is it to take control of the entire Donbass? As you know, President Putin recognized these two republics, and in their constitutional, what they claim as their constitutional area, which is about twice as large as the land they actually control. So are they trying to do that? Or is this actually a march on Kiev itself, on the capital, in which case, in either case, we're in for some very bloody warfare. But if it is a march to Kiev, this is going to be like nothing we have seen really since the Second World War.
Yeah, it's imminent. She kept saying that, Bill, Ambassador Taylor, she kept saying this is imminent. There is the Ukraine right now, thanks to Russia, is on the brink of war.
With one another.
And Wolf, she also said that there's no justification. President Putin seems to be desperate to find a justification. He's encouraging these puppet governments, these two LNR and DNR puppet governments that he's recognized, to somehow give him the justification. So they've been asking him to come in and help them. They've been trying to get the Ukrainians to attack them, so that they can call in the Russian military to attack them and trigger this invasion. President Putin has nothing to tell the world about why he is invading Ukraine. He has nothing to tell. And so that's what Linda Thomas-Greenfield was saying when she was talking eloquently there at the Security Council.
If it happens, Fareed, let's say there is a full-scale invasion of Ukraine right now by Russia. Then what happens? Walk us through what you envisage. Everybody seems to think there would be an enormous number of casualties, civilians and military, plus millions, potentially millions of refugees.
So, as I said, let's think about it in two stages. First, you imagine they try to recapture the area that they claim is part of these phony independent republics. And I think Bill Taylor's point is very well taken. The Ukrainian government has so far showed extraordinary restraint. They have been shelled up on, they have been attacked, the ceasefires have been violated every hour, and the Ukrainian government so far has not responded. But that will not persist. If this new intervention takes place, the Ukrainian army will start fighting back. Now, the Russian army is the largest land army in Europe. So it is an unequal contest. But the Ukrainians have two things going for them: the will to fight to defend their own country, and a lot of fairly sophisticated military hardware that has been given to them by the United States over the last few years. I think you are likely to see a very bloody war. Unfortunately, again, as I said, the Ukrainians are outmatched. The Russians have a very formidable force. But the Ukrainians will fight. They will fight hard. They will fight to preserve their country. And most importantly, even if the Russians do, quote unquote, win, if they take a capital, if they take, the symbols and seats of power, the Ukrainians will keep fighting. And the Ukrainians will fight it through an insurgency. They will fight through various forms of resistance. I think that President Putin will be surprised to see that this is not going to be an easy one, even if technically he is able to achieve some military objectives.
You know, Ambassador Taylor, we've just learned that President Putin has just announced that a military operation has begun, he says, to protect Donbass, this disputed area, part of Ukraine, controlled in large measure by pro-Russian sympathizers over there, as well as Russian troops. What do you make of this?
Well, President Putin has a fine opening gambit. He is going to be able to push hard. It'll be bloody, but he will be able to overrun or push through a determined Ukrainian resistance. Ukrainian military does have, as Fareed says, it has sophisticated weapons, but even more important, it's got the will to fight, defend its own country, its own land. But the Russian army will be able to push through. It's a big country. It's the size of Texas. The Ukrainian people will resist. The Ukrainian people will make it hell for Russian occupiers. The Ukrainian government will presumably leave Kyiv. It will set up somewhere else, maybe in the West, but it will continue to support it, and the Ukrainian people will continue to support it. And the Russian opening is fine. The Russian they don't have an end game, Wolf. They don't have an end game.
Yeah, we're going to continue our special coverage. I want to thank all of our viewers for this special coverage tonight. I'll be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern in the Situation Room, 9 p.m. for CNN. Tonight, we're continuing to monitor what's going on. Our breaking news coverage continues right now with Don Lemon Tonight.
This is Don Lemon Tonight. Thank you for joining us. Here's our breaking news. Vladimir Putin announcing a special military operation claiming to protect Donbass. The UN calling an emergency meeting of the Security Council that's going on right now. The U.S. ambassador at the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, saying this just a moment ago.
Tonight, we're seeing the Russians close airspace, move troops into Donbass, and move forces into combat-ready positions. This is a perilous moment, and we're here for one reason and one reason only: to ask Russia to stop. Return to your borders.
I want to get right now to Jill Doherty and also our Caitlin Collins. Jill, you're in Moscow this evening. Vladimir Putin speaking just moments ago. Talk to us about this special envoy claiming to protect Donbass. What is he saying?
Well, he said that Russia was left no chance to protect itself from others, and he said he has decided to conduct a special military operation to protect Donbass. That's that region that we've been talking about in the east, which he recognized just the other day. He also said Russia plans do not include occupation of Ukrainian territories. So we would have to see what he means by that. The word occupation and also Ukrainian territories. It may mean that this operation is concentrated on Donbass, but again, this is just, coming rather unexpectedly from President Putin. I should say also, Don, that oddly enough, he is wearing the very same suit and tie that he wore the other day and the same location at his desk in which he delivered that very long speech earlier this week about Ukraine. He also mentioned, and he's been saying this for the last couple of days, Russia will not allow Ukraine to have nuclear weapons. Now, no one is talking about Ukraine having nuclear weapons. He makes the argument that they have the know-how from the old Soviet days and could create nuclear weapons. This is something that Ukraine absolutely denies, and probably most people in Europe and the United States would say that is not true. In fact, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons. But in any case, a dramatic moment here as the United Nations is talking about and debating this issue of Ukraine. President Putin on TV saying that he has decided to conduct a special military operation. Don?
Stand by, Joe. I want to bring in Caitlin Collins at the White House. Caitlin, Vladimir Putin speaking. Any response from the White House, from the president or any representative there?
We've asked. This speech from President Putin has just happened, and we know that President Biden had been monitoring this closely. The White House said he'd been being updated by his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, tonight, Don. But the split screen here is just chilling, because what you are seeing is this emergency session happening at the United Nations with these officials. Of course, we should note this is a session that is chaired by Russia, with these officials coming out one by one, condemning Putin's moves in recent days, saying that this is what they had predicted would happen, something that they did not want to happen. And then on the other side, you've got Putin announcing this military operation, which is exactly what the White House and other intelligence, other nations, other allies had predicted was going to happen. And you see there, the representative from Ireland is speaking. Just a few moments ago, we heard from Linda Thomas-Greenfield. She is the United States ambassador to the United Nations. She said she had just gotten off the phone with President Biden, and she came out and was pleading for Biden to stop, to take his troops back, to turn around and leave the border at Ukraine, where, of course, we know he's amassed much over 100,000 forces. And Don, I want to read something she said, because it talks about what the United States has been saying over the last few weeks, warning about what they believed was going to happen, how Putin was going to game this out, something that White House officials have said they believed caught the Russian leader off guard. And tonight, just a few moments ago, in these remarks, after speaking with President Biden, Linda Thomas-Greenfield said, over the last few weeks, Russia has called our predictions hysterical. They said we were lying. Russia said we were supplying the world with misinformation. Russia's diplomats even laughed in the face of human suffering that we were sounding the alarm about. And then, Don, she goes on and she said, but what we said would happen has come to pass for all of the world to see, pointing to what has happened, pointing to Putin recognizing these breakaway Ukrainian territories as so-called independent, asking for parliament, basically demanding from Parliament that he could put Russian forces in there. And now this chilling speech that he has given tonight, saying that he has sanctioned this military operation, Don.
And Jill, as we get this new information in, stand by. I've learned now that we have Matthew Chance. Matthew Chance is going to join us now from Kyiv. Matthew, good evening to you. What is the word from Kyiv? Are people responding? Anyone there responding to President Putin, Russian president, saying that he is going to supply this special military operation to protect Donbass?
It's too early for a response, Don, if I'm absolutely honest, because this has come out of nowhere. This speech by Vladimir Putin on Russian media, basically saying that he's launched this special operation in Donbass, calling on Ukrainians to drop their weapons, saying not to resist, essentially, and saying that any responsibility for bloodshed as a result of this, basically war that's been, suggested or declared by President Putin is on the hands of the Ukrainians who resist. Oh, I tell you what, I just heard a big bang right here behind me. I thought we shouldn't have done the live shot here. There are big explosions taking place in Kiev right now. I can't see where they're taking place from this vantage point here on top of the roof of the hotel in central Kiev. And I can't explain what they are, but I heard 4 or 5 explosions a few moments ago. I don't know whether our viewers or whether you in the studio there could hear what I just heard. You could, right. Yeah. So, I don't know what it is, but I will tell you that the United States has warned
Was that another one?
The Ukrainians. Yeah, I think it was, but they're quite distant from where I am now. But I can tell you that the United States has of course warned the Ukrainian authorities that it is possible that there could be strikes, airstrikes, missile attacks, ground attacks as well on various places around the country, including on the capital, Kiev. Now, I don't know whether that's what we're witnessing now, but it's a remarkable coincidence that I'm hearing these explosions in Kiev right now.
Let me jump in and ask you.
Minutes after Vladimir Putin gave that speech.
Yes, minutes after the speech. I just want to, have you heard any explosions, anything similar since you have been in Kyiv?
No, absolutely not. This is the first time This is the first time that we've heard anything. Like, it's been absolutely silent in this city throughout the course of tonight, and for past several weeks, we've not seen anything at all. In fact, I've never heard anything like this in Kiev for the years that I've been coming here and reporting from here. So this is the first time. But look, it's going to be more than just a coincidence. I can hear rumblings right now.
Matthew, is it safe where you are?
Pinpoint. Yeah, I think it's relatively safe at the moment. Look, I've got a. Oh,
there's another one.
I've got a flak jacket right here. Let me just get it on.
So Matthew Chance is live person in Kyiv, Ukraine. Matthew, we're going to stick with you. Matthew is on a roof in central Kyiv, he's telling us, and just for the first time, just moments ago, you witnessed live on this program explosions. Again, he doesn't know exactly what those explosions are, but he says it's the first time that he has heard them since he has been in Kyiv. He is trying to put on a flak jacket now to make sure that he is safe. I think we should stick with this just to see what's happening as he is doing this.
Yeah, I think
and we'll get to our other correspondents in a moment, but this is where it appears there are things going on. Now, the president of Vladimir Putin moments ago saying that he was going to send a special military operation to protect Donbass, and then just minutes after that speech aired on state television, our Matthew Chance is doing a live shot for us here at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock a.m. in Ukraine. And there are explosions. Again, not exactly sure what they are, but Matthew Chance is getting into place now, and he's live. Matthew, are you back with us? Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you throughout all of that. I'm sorry about the
Matthew, just so you know, your flak jacket is covering your microphone. If you can somehow get it out.
Yep, here it is.
There you go. Now, loud and clear, Matthew. Go ahead, please. And please, if you're safe, you need to put on your headgear, or you're good.
Yeah.
Take your time.
Yeah.
Don't rush.
So look, sorry, I think I've broken my microphone as I put on the flak jacket. But look, there you go.
Okay.
I'll have to hold it in front of me like a little mic. But
okay. So Matthew,
look, I mean, over the past,
I want you to stand by. We'll keep
ahead.
Matthew up. Matthew, don't go anywhere because I want to get to Clarissa Ward. She's in Kharkiv, and I understand, Clarissa, you are hearing blasts as well.
Yeah, that's right. It's been a few minutes now. We have been hearing a steady stream of loud strikes. It's not clear exactly what they are targeting. The city is eerily quiet still. Most people probably fast asleep when President Putin made that surprise speech announcing essentially the beginning of serious military action. We don't know exactly what those strikes are targeting, but our colleague Fred Pleiken, who is on the Russian side of the border, just about 30 miles away, has said that he has been hearing helicopters in the skies near Belgrade, not far from here. That's where we have seen a large Russian military buildup near the border. And now people here are going to be waking up to a very different country than the one they went to sleep in. President Putin showing no signs of backing down at all. And as I said, we've been hearing, it's quiet now, of course, always this happens when you finally come to us for the live, it's actually quiet for a moment. But we have been hearing a steady stream of thuds all around the city. We are in the city of Kharkiv. It's a city of 1.4 million people up in the northeast of the country. It is not a city that is accustomed to war. It has been hit heavily in the Second World War. But this is a city full of young professionals. And up until a few days ago, nobody would have believed that this was actually going to happen. And yet here we are after 5 o'clock in the morning, witnessing the beginnings of what promises to be a very ugly war.
Yeah. Clarissa, I want you to stay with us, you and Matthew Chance. And for those of us who are just joining us, I'm sure many are tuning in. Many more are tuning in now. You're live watching CNN. What has happened just moments ago, there was a speech by the Russian President Vladimir Putin saying that he was sending a special military operation to protect Donbass. And moments after that, blasts were heard, where Matthew Chance is now in the city of Kyiv. Clarissa Ward also hearing steady blasts in Kharkiv or Kharkiv. Kharkiv is how she is pronouncing it there. And that had just happened moments ago. Clarissa, before I get back to Matthew, Matthew said that he had not heard anything, any blast, this is the first time that he's hearing, even with the operation that had been happening for years in Ukraine. He had never heard anything like it. Does that Is that the same for you?
Absolutely. I mean, we're used to, being on the front lines, covering the crisis and the war that's been going on here for 8 years. You heard artillery, you would hear gunfire, grenades, mortars, things of that nature. But what we have been hearing rumbling across these skies for the last 5 to 10 minutes is something of a very different nature. And I think that's borne out when you look at the buildup on the Russian side and you see the amount of weaponry and hardware and troops. This is clearly an operation on a much larger scale than anything Ukraine has witnessed in 8 years of this war. And what's just so striking is that the mayor of Kharkiv yesterday had put out a tweet basically telling people, continue about your daily business, stay calm, stay unified. The city services are still working. You should still go to work. And less than 24 hours later, here we are, the beginning of a major military operation. I would like to say that there are bomb shelters in this city, one that's not too far away from here. But so far, there's no sense that there's any way of telegraphing to ordinary people that this has begun or of giving them any sense of how they should behave, where they should go, what they should do. There has been a state of emergency declared across the country. But when we were coming into this city, hours ago, we saw a couple of checkpoints to go in and to go out, but that was about it. And so you definitely don't have the sense here that people are really properly prepared for this moment, Victor.
All right, it's done. Stand by. I want you to stand by. I'm going to get back to Matthew Chance. Matthew, joining us now. Matthew, you put on your gear. I'm glad that you're okay. Clarissa said that they heard a steady stream of explosions where she is in Kharkiv. And now we heard live what was happening to you in Kyiv. Any explosions?
Well, actually, since we last spoke, it's gone quiet again. But we did hear that flurry of explosions, maybe 7 or 8 different distinct explosions, but they seem quite distant away. I mean, it's when you come under artillery fire or you hear explosions close up, you can really tell how close they are. And these seem like quite a distance away. You can hear them in the distance. Still in Kiev, obviously, it's a big city. And we've got this good panorama across the city here now. And it's not quite clear, and I've been speaking to our security advisors here, it's not clear what may have been targeted, but obviously this is the capital of Ukraine. The defense ministry is here. The foreign ministry building is right behind us here. Government buildings, command and control centers are here. And of course, there are also units of the Ukrainian military on the outskirts of the Ukrainian capital as well, which are positioned, obviously, to defend the city from any kind of ground invasion. The reason I raise that is because one of the elements of the US intelligence has been passed on to the Ukrainians, according to the Ukrainian officials that I've spoken to, is that, the Russian attack, which has been, which was, talked about by this intelligence, which now seems to be sort of coming to fruition, involved not just airstrikes, but also an element of ground attack as well, ground skirmishes that was described to me, sort of both in Kiev and in other cities as well. And so, look, I mean, we don't know. It's difficult to explain at this point, being so distant from where these things are happening. But clearly something is happening now, and that is very different from what was happening just a few minutes ago. And we've mentioned this already, but it is remarkable that this happened within seconds, really, or within a minute or two of Vladimir Putin finishing that dramatic, unexpected speech that he made on Russian media, saying that he'd started a special operation inside Donbass, and again calling on the Ukrainian military to surrender their arms, and saying that any bloodshed as a result of this war that appears now to have been launched, any bloodshed for that would be on the hands of the Ukrainian government. Now, I haven't had any reaction yet from Ukrainian officials, but they will be watching this, and I will get reaction. But they've obviously condemned it already, or condemned the build-up of forces that have led to this, and have welcomed the sanctions that have been placed on Russia as a result of its recognition a couple of days ago of those rebel republics in the east of the country. And they've called for more sanctions to be placed on Russia, more tougher sanctions that they hope will deter Vladimir Putin from going any further. And I can only imagine, I can predict that those calls are going to get louder and louder as these as this continues. Another big explosion right there. I don't know whether you heard that. Where did that come from? Yeah, we're going to move to the other camera. We can move to the other camera if you like. But at the moment, we've got another camera set up just a short distance away, which gives us a better panorama of the city.
Can you walk there now, Matthew? Or
yeah.
Is it?
Can we walk there now, Lewis? Is it live now?
It's a different camera. They're going to have to change paths.
Okay.
No, we can't.
Okay.
We can't basically.
Okay, that's fine. So Matthew, listen.
It's a different path.
If you will continue, it's already set up. If you're going to continue to talk, and they can set it up, or you tell me what you need. If you need to get to safety, if you want to go to the other camera.
Okay.
We still have Clarissa Ward.
You set
correct?
up the camera.
It's already set up.
Okay.
It's just going to go handheld. I've got the mic here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So listen,
Okay,
this is all happening live. So and we want to be very transparent about what's happening. Matthew Chance is live for us in Kyiv. At the moment we went live with him just a moment ago, about 10:07, 5:07 in Ukraine, in Kyiv, a series of explosions could be heard as he was giving his live report. He put on his flak jacket, also his helmet, his headgear, and then continued to report. We want to make sure that he is safe. He is now moving to another camera that will give us a better perspective of what is happening there behind him in the city of Kyiv. Meantime, in Kharkiv, where our Clarissa Ward is joining us this evening, also a series of explosions that she is hearing as well, Clarissa. Now, Matthew just heard an explosion there. Are you still witnessing anything now?
So it's been quiet now for a few minutes, although I will say our colleague Fred Pleiken, who is on the Russian side of the border, reports that he is hearing a lot of outgoing artillery fire. Not sure exactly where that might be landing, but clearly we are on the brink or in the midst now of something truly significant, and something that I think many people here never really actually believed was going to happen. But when you heard President Putin's words there, and they were so chilling as he told Ukrainians to lay down their arms, as he said that any responsibility for any bloodshed would lie with the Ukrainian regime. And he said that the Russians have no intention to occupy Ukraine. So at this stage, we really don't have a good sense of what the scope of this operation is, or frankly, even what the target is. We can only go by what we know from those Maxar satellite images and eyewitness reports. A huge amount of Russian weaponry and manpower has amassed all around Ukraine, but particularly not too far from us. We're about 20 miles or so from the Russian border, and 10 miles beyond that, inside of Russia, the latest images from Maxar are showing an increased number of troops, assuming like fighting unit positions. And so the question now becomes, how do the people of Kharkiv prepare for this?
I want you to stand by, Clarissa. By the way, Clarissa and Matthew are about 300 miles apart, so not the same series of explosions that they are hearing. It's not possible for that. But I want to get to Frederick Pleiken, as Clarissa just mentioned. Frederick is north of Kharkiv. And Frederick, I understand that you're hearing artillery fire. Can you confirm that, please?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Don. We believe that we're hearing artillery fire. I'm in Belgorod on the Russian side of the border. So essentially, I would assume that some of the fire that Clarissa is hearing impact in the Kharkiv area is probably coming from Russian positions right here in the area around Belgorod. And in the distance, sort of over there, we're hearing a lot of outgoing artillery fire. Those are sort of the kind of thuds that you would hear from artillery cannons, but we're also hearing salvos that could very well be rockets that are being fired as well. And just a couple of moments ago, I'd say less than a minute ago, there was a really loud bang here where it's really hard to imagine that would have been incoming fire. That also sounded like something really, really big was just shot into the direction of Ukraine. And that, of course, is after the past couple of days, we've seen a massive military buildup here, especially in the Belgorod area. Of course, we are very close to Kharkiv, very close to where Clarissa is. And as we've been coming in here, we've also been seeing that military activity by the Russians. We drove in here, and all the military trucks that were driving around there, they all had their license plates turned around, seemingly trying to mask their movements, maybe also trying to mask people trying to see what units those trucks were with. So there has been a big military buildup, and we can still sort of hear in the distance that steady stream of what sounds like artillery at work, what sounds like cannons being fired here. Belgorod, of course, one of the main areas where the Russians have concentrated their forces, Don. And throughout the day, I traveled really on the entire border region between Russia and Ukraine, down by Donetsk, where it seems as though there's some fighting going on there as well, all the way up to here to Belgorod. It's a huge area, but the main concentration of Russian forces are up here and down near the Donetsk area. And we can certainly see, or we can certainly hear, at least from our vantage point, that it really seems as though that military operation is very much in full force from what we're hearing, standing right here on the balcony at the moment, but also having driven through the city as well, Don.
And are we hearing that? Are you hearing that now as you speak, Matthew? Excuse me, Frederick.
Yeah, now we're hearing it. Now it's gotten a little more, there's still a little, it's a little more in the distance now. What I think they've done is they probably have different sort of positions here, where you'll have some artillery positions that might be a little further away from where we are, but they must also have some that are pretty close, because we have heard some of the bangs that have been pretty loud. There's a steady stream. You can probably barely hear it over the microphone right now, but there have been certainly some bangs that really have shaken the neighborhood. There's still some people who are walking around down here who all of them stopped and saw that something big had just either been fired off or impacted. But from our vantage point here, it certainly seems as though this is where a lot of the outgoing fire that is possibly hitting the Kharkiv area is probably originating from right here, Don.
All right. Frederick Pleitgen is on the Russian side in Belgorod, and also Matthew Chance is in Kyiv, and our Clarissa Ward is joining us from Kyiv as well. Excuse me, joining us from Kharkiv. I want to get back to Matthew Chance now. Matthew, when you first began your reporting, we could clearly hear the series of explosions behind you. You've moved to a different position.
Yeah.
What is the latest?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've simply moved to this different position, Don, because it gives us a much broader panorama of this city. It's dark, of course. It is, nearly 5:25 in the morning here. The sunrise is about an hour from now. But we are hearing these rumbles, these blasts coming from this general direction. This general direction is to the east. And I've been told by sort of our security advisors here that that's the direction of the airport, right over there. That's where the main international airport is for Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, and that's where we heard the most recent explosion take place. Now, we don't know whether the airport was targeted or not. We haven't got that kind of information yet. But there are surface-to-air missile sites around that airport as well, to provide, again, one of the defensive perimeter, things that are put around the Ukrainian capital to provide some defenses. So it's possible they could have been targeted. At this point, you get into speculation about what could be the purpose of attacking, the Ukrainian main airport in the Ukrainian capital. I mean, is it because they want to, secure it with ground forces and put in, airborne troops in there? That's one possibility. But then that would imply that there's going to be a much broader sort of attack or invasion of Kiev and of Ukraine than was implied by Vladimir Putin.
But if this is just the beginning,
of course, if you can just remind our viewers,
if this is going to continue, this is just the beginning. So I would imagine that you will be witnessing a lot more of what you've witnessed earlier. Matthew, stand by, be safe. We're going to get back to you. I want to get now to the White House, where Caitlin Collins has some breaking news now, and the president is responding. What do you have, Caitlin?
Well, Don, this is what the White House had feared, and we do just have the first statement from President Biden on this tonight. It's important, so I'm going to read it to you in full. President Biden says the prayers of the entire world are with the people of Ukraine tonight as they suffer an unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. President Putin has chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic loss of life and human suffering. He says Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction this attack will bring, and the United States and its allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. The world will hold Russia accountable. Don, he adds, I will be monitoring the situation from the White House this evening and will continue to get regular updates from my national security team. He says tomorrow I will meet with my G7 counterparts in the morning. That's going to be virtual. And President Biden adds, then speak to the American people to announce the further consequences the United States and our allies and partners will impose on Russia for this needless act of aggression against Ukraine and global peace and security. He says we will also coordinate with our NATO allies to ensure a strong, united response that deters any aggression against the alliance. And Don, most importantly, he says tonight, Jill and I are praying for the brave and proud people of Ukraine. So it's the first statement from President Biden since this happened, since that announcement from President Putin, that chilling announcement. He says he will speak tomorrow after he meets with those G7 leaders virtually to talk about what the response is going to be from the United States for these actions by President Putin.
And all of this happening within just the last few minutes, Caitlin, very quickly after Vladimir Putin gave that speech about this special military operation that he is sending in. And then what we've heard explosions happening in Ukraine and on the Russian side of the border as well. Stand by. I want to get to Clarissa Ward now, who is joining us again live. Clarissa also hearing those explosions from her location. What are you hearing now, Clarissa?
Well, it's been a little bit quieter now, Don. I heard something, but quite far away in the distance. But that first initial period of I'd say roughly 5 to 10 minutes after President Putin effectively declared this war, you heard a very steady stream of explosions. Can't say what exactly they were, whether they were missiles or what kind of strikes they were. But still, there's this surreal sense. I can't quite explain it. I think everybody here, up until the very last minute, just didn't think this was actually going to happen. They didn't think it was possible because it doesn't make any sense. And no one could understand how President Putin would make such a decision and potentially kill so many people. I don't know if you could just hear that. That was another strike in the distance there. But now it's very clear that Ukrainians are waking up in a different country to the one that they went to sleep in. And I think they'll be waking up with a real sense of alarm because part of the government's strategy here, really, Don, has been to try to keep people calm, to try to avert a state of panic. And so one doesn't have the sense that there has been a huge amount of preparation put into place, particularly here where I am in Kharkiv, where just yesterday the mayor was telling people to go about their daily business, to go to work, saying that, the city's facilities were still operational and it was important to stay calm and to stay united. And so I'm sure a lot of people will have questions waking up this morning as to what they should do next. Where should they go? Should they leave the city? President Putin has said that he does not intend to occupy Ukraine, but still we have so little sense of what the scale and scope of this operation is going to be, what the targets are going to be, what the timeline is going to be, and what this means for the more than 40 million ordinary Ukrainians who have absolutely no reason at all to be seeking any kind of conflict with Russia, and who, as I said, Don, just never really believed, I don't think until this moment, that it could actually happen. And we're just starting to see in the distance the beginnings of dawn here. The sun will be coming up in the next hour. But it remains unclear what happens next. What happens now? Is there any further possibility of de-escalation? Can this be stopped? So many questions and so few answers, and still we haven't yet heard anything recent from Ukraine's leadership in response to this dramatic and devastating escalation, Don.
Yeah, you're right. That's who we haven't heard from. We've heard from Russia. We've heard from the White House. And now we need to hear from Ukraine. I want to get to Matthew Chance. Thank you, Clarissa. We'll get back to you. Be safe. I want to get to Matthew Chance now. Matthew, what's happening where you are?
South of the hotel.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been about 3... Sorry, what was that, Zara? There's been about 3 explosions since we last talked. Again, in distant areas from where we are in central Kiev, but still sort of relatively close by. It's not clear the direction in which they're being targeted, or these explosions are taking place. But you can see, as Laura was saying, I mean, this is an absolute shock. I mean, even right up until the last moment, Vladimir Putin, it was assumed or was hoped, would not pull the trigger on this. There was even a last-ditch appeal by President Zelensky of Ukraine. He tried to call the Kremlin and speak to Vladimir Putin, but that, he said, was met with silence. He put out a social media post, which we've been reporting on before this all started to happen, in which he spoke in Russian directly to the Russian people and said, look, you know, you're told that we need to be freed, but we're already free. He said, we may be differences between us, but it doesn't mean that we have to be enemies. But that is a message that does not seem to have been heard in Moscow. And with Vladimir Putin making that short statement that he's launched a special operation, military operation in Donbass, he said, which is in the far east of Ukraine, and urging Ukrainian military to put down their weapons. Any bloodshed, again, he said, would be on the hands of the Ukrainian government. Well, that's also been coupled with these explosions taking place in the Ukrainian capital as well. It is so tense in the city tonight. It's so quiet in Kiev up until these explosions took place. A state of emergency has been imposed across the country. And in Ukraine, what that means is that everybody had to go home by 11 o'clock. It means that, you know, people who were in the reserve forces for military service have been banned from leaving the country. And of course, there's been more security put on the outskirts of the city, checkpoints going into the city. And indeed, it may be some of those military checkpoints, who knows, or some of the military defences outside of the city anyway, that may have been targeted with these explosions. Travel installations, transport installations, key government buildings, they've all got additional security around them. And, you know, obviously it is extremely disturbing to hear these explosions in the darkness, so we can't see exactly what's being hit right now, or which direction, the explosions are coming from. But it's deeply disturbing about what's taking place in Ukraine right now.
Perhaps you can help me out with this. CNN is getting reporting.
The invasion has begun. Missile strikes in Kiev.
Okay. Yeah, so I just stepped away there, Don, because my producer was telling me that an advisor to the Ukrainian Interior Ministry, who we've just been speaking to, says that the invasion has begun. That was his words. And he said that what we've been hearing, these explosions, are missile strikes. He didn't give any further detail about what has been hit, about what's been targeted. But again, the advisor to the Ukrainian Interior Ministry telling CNN that the invasion has begun, those are his words, and that those explosions that we've been witnessing here in Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, are missile strikes. So there's a development, some clarity, perhaps, from the Ukrainian side, and their first reaction, as far as I'm aware, to what we are witnessing here in Kiev and what's taking place, it seems, in other parts of the country as well, tonight at the hands of Russia.
And there is a delay, so pardon me for as you were getting that information in. And so thank you very much. And I was just talking to Clarissa Ward, and she said exactly, you said who we haven't heard from is Ukraine, and now we're hearing from this interior minister, you said, ministry saying the invasion has begun, explosions are missile strikes that we're hearing. This is what I wanted to ask you as you were getting that new information. CNN is also getting reporting that the explosions heard by CNN in Kyiv came from the east, which is in the direction of the international airport. Talk to us about the significance of that, if that is indeed true, Matthew.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does seem that, I mean, look, this direction here is the east, and we've got our camera positioned on this balcony here because it overlooks the direction of Russia to the east, to the northeast. And that's where the Borispol International Airport is located. As I mentioned to you earlier, it's not just an airport, it's a defensive location as well, where there are surface-to-air missile battalions stationed there. And it could be those that have been taken out. What our security advisor was telling us is that, look, we don't know right now why the airport would have been hit, but it may be, and it is only a maybe at this point, but it may be that some kind of air bridge or air location is being, made secure, landing zone being made secure, that could result in the Russians bringing in troops. Now, why would they want to do that? Is it to invade and occupy the Ukrainian capital? Well, I mean, one possibility is that, yes. It also might be to instill a sense of panic and fear amongst the leadership of this country and to force them underground. Remember, one of the reasons I think they may be hitting Kiev is to deny the forces in the east. And there was another big explosion just then as well, which you could hear. It's also coming from the east side, I'm told. Actually, from the south side, the southeast. One of the reasons they may be striking Kiev right now is to try to cut off and deny the command and control centers to the forces that are, for the most part, the Ukrainian military forces that are, for the most part, in the Donbass area, in the east of Ukraine. Once you cut off the defense ministry and the sort of officers and the secret service and the intelligence, headquarters here in Kiev, and the political leaders, of course, and it creates a sort of higher degree of confusion in that remote location, hundreds of miles away in the actual war zone, which has been a war zone for 8 years now in the east of the country. So that may be one explanation. But I mean, frankly, at this point, we just don't know what's being targeted. It looks like it's coming from the direction of the airport. As I say, there are defensive structures around Kiev which have been reinforced over the past couple of days as well, particularly now there's a state of emergency been declared here. And it could well be those that are being targeted. We're going to get some more clarity on this as the night proceeds and as the daytime breaks, of course. But
Matthew,
at the moment, all we've got.
Why don't you stand by for a bit, and I just want to update our viewers. I just want to update our viewers, and we'll get back to you. We have plenty of time to talk about it. I just want to, because as this is happening, more people tend to tune in, and I just want to make sure that people know what's happening. You've been watching our Matthew Chance. He is in Kyiv, giving a report just a short time ago at the top of the hour, and he heard explosions there. Not exactly sure what it was, but now Matthew is saying he's hearing from the Ukrainian Interior Ministry saying that the invasion has begun, and also saying that the explosions are missile strikes. Our Clarissa Ward is in Kharkiv, also hearing explosions, both on the Ukrainian side of the border, and also our Frederick Pleitgen is joining us from the Russian side of the border, and he is hearing explosions there as well. He is also hearing that it is artillery fire. So it is believed that, according to the Interior Ministry, that this invasion has begun. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, releasing a statement blasting Russia and President Vladimir Putin, saying it was an unprovoked and unnecessary invasion. And we're also getting reports from CNN teams who are all over Ukraine and also Russia, and they're hearing these explosions. If they're close to the border, they're hearing these explosions coming from the Ukrainian side of the border. So that is where we are right now. We'll continue our reporting with Matthew Chance, who is getting the very latest information. Matthew, back to you now. Matthew, Matthew, who is on that terrace and getting information from his producers. Matthew, what do you have?
Accurate air to ground targeting.
I got it. Okay, Don, are you hearing me all right?
Stand by, Matthew. I want to get to the Russian ambassador speaking at the UN. We'll get back to Matthew. Let's listen.
Okay.
Focused on weakening Russia and promoting the bloc from NATO to the borders. For us, these people are women, children, the elderly, who for 8 years have been cowering from Ukraine's shelling and provocations. For us, these are Ukraine people and not the Maidan authorities. This is the difference in our approaches. If you do not change the geopolitical lens, you will never understand us. Then, those on whose behalf this decision I mentioned was made, who not even thought about for these 8 years, simply calling them pro-Russian separatists and terrorists. Those people are the most important for us. I'd like to say once again that the root of today's crisis around Ukraine is the actions of Ukraine itself, who for many years was sabotaging its obligations under the Minsk package of measures. Last week, even, there was a hope that Kiev would rethink and nevertheless implement what it signed up to do in 2015. For this, first and foremost, they needed direct dialogue with Donetsk and Lugansk. However, further confirmation that Ukraine is not ready for this type of dialogue and steps to grant Donbass special status as set forth in the Minsk agreements, while with the support of this position from Western backers, finally convinced us that we simply cannot force those living in the Donbass to suffer more. Inasmuch as I already said, the Ukrainian provocation against those in Donbass not only has not stopped, but has intensified. The leaders of the LPR and the DPR turned to us with a request to provide military support in line with bilateral cooperation agreements as agreed at the same time as they were recognition. This is a logical step, which is a consequence of the actions of the Ukrainian regime. During this meeting...
So that is the Russian ambassador obviously defending their interaction. You see the Ukrainian ambassador sitting there with his hand, his head sort of in his hand, in disbelief, as everyone else except for Russia feels the same sentiment. He is all of us, as we say. We'll get back to our correspondents in Russia and also Ukraine. You're watching CNN.
Certified turbocharger, suspension, and fuel injection.
Translation? Certified goosebumps.
Certified from headlamp to tailpipe.
That's certified head turns.
And it's all backed by our unlimited mileage warranty.
That means unlimited peace of mind. Mercedes-Benz certified pre-owned. Translation: the Mercedes of your dreams is closer than you think.
What makes my heart beat? Having everything I want in the place I love. Jamaica, heartbeat of the world. Let's go.
Age before beauty? Why not both? Visibly diminish wrinkled skin in just 2 days. Crepe Corrector Lotion, only from Gold Bond. Championing your skin.
Doug.
And it's easy to customize your insurance at libertymutual.com, so you only pay for what you need. Isn't that right, Limu? 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 Sorry, one sec. Yeah. There he is.
Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
I've traveled every road in this here land. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I travel, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. I've been to Pittsburgh, Parkersburg, Gravelburg, Colorado, Ellen City, Cedar City, Dodge City, what a pity. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere.
It's true. Everyone gets a free new Samsung Galaxy S22 with a Galaxy trade-in. Any year, any condition.
Really? Even if my old phone looks like this?
Dude, why?
How could you? It's okay, people. I've trained for this.
It's not complicated. Everyone gets a free new Samsung Galaxy S22 with the Galaxy trade-in. Any year, any condition.
Are you ready to start a great career?
Safelite is now hiring.
You will love your job.
There's room to grow.
And lots of opportunities. So what are you waiting for? Apply now and make a difference.
Safelite repair, Safelite replace.
Man, I love that song.
Can we go back?
Are you paying?
With Brooklinen, your staycation starts now. Long-lasting, comfortable, and delivered right to your door. Currently on sale at brooklinen.com.
King C. Gillette is a complete lineup of tools and facial hair care products. This is the Style Master, designed to style your stubble in one stroke. A pivoting metal head that defines every edge, and 3 comb lengths for added versatility. One tool that helps you choose, change, and master your style. King C. Gillette.
And I'm on a roll. Hey, 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 hey. And I'm on a roll.
How would you describe him? Alex Jones, the king of conspiracy theories. He will just straight up lie. Could he be a threat to American democracy?
There is a war for your mind.
The Alex Jones Story, Sunday at 9.
You're watching breaking news on CNN. The invasion has begun. That is according to the Ukrainian Interior Minister. Explosions are missile strikes, we are told. Our reporters on the ground in Ukraine are told. Russian President Vladimir Putin releasing a statement, really speaking not long ago, just at the top of the hour, saying that he was going to send a special forces into the area to protect Donbass. And then shortly after that, our folks on the ground, our reporters, started to hear explosions. We've got reporters on both sides of the border, on the Russian side and the Ukrainian side as well. Our Joel Doherty is on the ground for us as well. There's Clarissa Ward, there's Frederick Pleiken, and also Matthew Chance as well. I want to get now to let's get to Jill Doherty to get some comment as they are listening to this, unless we're hearing explosions on the ground here. Again, this is all happening now live, so you're witnessing it just as I am. So, Jill, thank you very much for joining us this evening. A lot has happened since we spoke to you at the beginning of the hour. What do you make of these explosions that we're hearing and the Interior Minister saying, or Ministry saying the invasion has begun?
Well, it obviously has. And I think the most interesting and the important part right now is to look at exactly at what President Putin is saying. So what he is saying is he has launched this special operation, this special military operation to protect the people, he says, in Donbass who've been subjected to genocide, as he puts it, and all sorts of attacks for 8 years. And what he's talking about, and this is kind of a disturbing thing, he wants to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. Now, that could mean, further afield than simply Donbass. He also says they are going to bring to justice those who committed numerous bloody crimes against civilians, including civilians of the Russian Federation. And then, at the same time, he says, we don't plan to include the occupation of Ukrainian territories. We're not going to impose anything on anyone by force. So what you can make of this is it does appear with those explosions in the capital and some other cities that this goes beyond Donbass. And what do they plan on doing? How will they demilitarize and denazify a country if they don't take it over? There are a lot of questions. And I can tell you also, Don, today, this unfolded like clockwork. You had this denazification all day long on the Russian state media. You had pictures and reports and movies about Nazis, video from World War II, video of neo-Nazis that do exist in Ukraine.
Jill, I need to interrupt. I'm sorry.
Who said,
I want to get to the UN. Pardon my interruption. I want to get to the UN. The Ukrainian minister is speaking now. The Ukrainian ambassador.
You declare the war. It is the responsibility of this body to stop the war. So I call on every one of you to do everything possible to stop the war. Or should I play the video with your president declaring the war? Thank you very much.
Опять я вынужден сказать фразу, что я благодарю представителя Украины за его выступление. На вопросы я отвечать не планирую. Все, что я знаю сегодня, я уже сказал. Будить министра Лаврова
Waking up Minister Lavrov at this time is not something I plan to do. You said the information that we have will be something we provide. And this isn't called a war, this is called a special military operation in the Donbass. I now give the floor to the representative of Germany.
Mr. President, we meet at the very moment of a military escalation we have not experienced in Europe for over a generation's time. The President of the Russian Federation announced a military operation on Ukrainian territory. We condemn this in the strongest possible terms. And we call upon all members of the Security Council and the United Nations to now stand up for Ukraine and against a shameless...
Germany now speaking at the United Nations, as you know, the United Nations going into the evening here. You heard from the Russian ambassador responding to the Ukrainian ambassador. The Ukrainian ambassador saying it is the responsibility of this body to stop the war. In his response, the Russian ambassador saying we're not calling it a war. This is a special military operation in Donbass. The doublespeak or the misinformation speak that has been coming from Russia. Same thing coming from Vladimir Putin. We're hearing it from the ambassador as well. I want to. What preceded these explosions that we're hearing in Ukraine was the Russian President Vladimir Putin giving this speech, saying that he was going to send a special military operation to protect Donbass. We'll hear from him, and then we'll get a response from General Wesley Clark on the other side. Here it is.
The People's Republic of Lugansk and Donetsk need our help. They've asked for our help with this regard. from the 7th Charter, from the UN Charter of the Territorial Assembly, an agreement on friendship and assistance with the people of Donetsk, the people of Lugansk. A decision has been made of a special military operation. Its aim is to defend the people who for 8 years have put up with terrible humiliation.
That happened just before 10 o'clock Eastern here, just before 7 a.m. In Ukraine. I want to bring in now General Wesley Clark to respond to all of this. He is saying that they strive to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, as well as repeating this baseless claim of genocide in the country's Donbass region and using that as an excuse to, as he says, send this military operation to protect Donbass. Your response, General?
Yeah, I think this is information provided just to the Russian people primarily. He wants to spread the lies so he can maintain public support in Russia, and we shouldn't believe any piece of it. There was no Nazification. The Russian troops are there already. There was never any conflict, and it's just a false flag deception operation. Now there is something happening right now. We know there have been explosions in Kyiv and Kharkiv. We know there's other stuff going on along the line. We're getting reports of troop movement. We know there's been a cat and mouse game for several weeks in Kyiv trying to deal with the Russian special operators that have been in there as saboteurs. So this is probably the start of something else. But when he says it's a special military operation, there's no limit to that. We don't know what that means. And this is, and so far as we hear it, it's just more propaganda and disinformation that could confuse our response and our public opinion. This is an illegal military occupation. It's the seizure of territory of another country. It's the start of a major military operation. It's war that Europe hasn't seen in 75 years.
We have heard General Wesley Clark from Vladimir Putin. We've also heard from the President of the United States denouncing what he calls these baseless strikes on the Ukrainian people. And we're also hearing now from the advisor for the Interior Ministry of Ukraine saying earlier this evening that the invasion has begun. That's a quote. Another quote is missile strikes on Kyiv. And that was released to a group of journalists there. So we've heard from just about everyone involved. And of course, you have been listening to what's happening at the United Nations this evening. The Russian ambassador and the Ukrainian ambassador going back and forth about the language. One of them calling it a war. The other one says it's a special military operation. Respond to that. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, I think that there will always be these dialogues going on. This is part of the Russian game plan. And of course, we want the UN to get involved in this. Russia is acting illegally. We want to bring it to the attention of the world. And Vladimir Putin's acting like a war criminal. Now, in the 1990s, we had a lot of war criminals in Serbia. They were brought to justice. Many of them were behind bars. At least one of them committed suicide in the process. Putin has got to understand that the world is not going to tolerate this kind of behavior in the 21st century. He will be censured. He will be branded as a criminal, and the people of Russia will be hurt. So it's very important to keep this dialogue going at the United Nations, expose the lies of Russia, and ultimately bring international law against them, as well as other means of resistance.
General, I want to ask you that advisor to the Interior Ministry of Ukraine, his name is Anton Gerashenko, who said that the invasion has begun. Also saying here that control centers such as airfields and military headquarters are being hit by the shelling. Do you expect Russia to take Kyiv?
Yeah, I think that Russia will move forward and try to take land that's currently occupied by Ukraine. And we don't know what the extent of this operation might be, Don. It might be a phased operation in which they try to draw the Ukrainian forces and reserves east to block a breakout from Donbass, and then come in behind them from the north or up from the south with an amphibious assault. We just don't know what the final shape of this is. Or it could be a simultaneous move. We would have expected to see an airstrike, several airstrikes, and some missile attacks and so forth. This has started rather cautiously, at least as far as we can tell from the information that's publicly available. I have heard offline that there is fighting along the line of contact around Mariupol, that there's action there, but we don't have any official reports of that at this time. And so we don't really understand the extent of it. But we do know that this is the way it would begin. We always expected it to begin with the cyber attack and with the special sabotage and so forth, including in places like Kyiv and Kharkiv.
All right, thank you, General. We'll get back to you. And if you're just joining us, you can see on your screen now what is happening. The military operation has begun. The invasion, according to the Ukrainian Interior Minister, has begun. CNN has you covered. We are on both sides of the border, on the Russian side and the Ukrainian side. Our Clarissa Ward is in Kharkiv. Our Frederick Pleiken is joining us from Belgrade. And also Matthew Chance is in Kyiv this evening. All of them hearing explosions. Our Jim Sciutto is going to join us in just a moment. And we have Jill Doherty, who's in Moscow. So the worldwide reach of CNN is with you right now. And we've got our Caitlin Collins at the White House. We're going to take a very quick break. We'll keep a close eye on what's happening in Ukraine. Join us back after the break in a moment.
Imagine getting $150,000 for 1 year of epic adventures in a new Dodge Hellcat. And you don't even have to quit your day job. You just need to show you got real drive. Are you our new chief donut maker?
There was just a burst of what sounded like automatic gunfire.
CNN is in Ukraine.
Russia's plan then, invade Ukraine from multiple points.
And in Russia.
Nothing more from the Kremlin.
On the front lines.
This kindergarten is less than 3 miles from the line of contact.
At this critical moment.
When you talk to people, a lot of worry, a lot of stress.
We're covering this from all around the world. In Moscow, Kyiv, Belarus.
And this
is CNN.
Florida Institute of Technology is building a new bridge for the Space Coast, the Health Sciences Research Center, a bridge between engineering and anatomy, math and medicine, software and soft tissue.
The healthcare industry depends on scientific advancement and innovation, and that's why having Florida Tech here on the Space Coast is so valuable.
The best place to put the Florida Institute of Technology is the Space Coast here in Melbourne, Florida.
Our work and your health go hand in hand. Florida Tech stands for biomedical engineering and health sciences. Florida Tech stands for the Space Coast.
Ready to save on Hondas? Save thousands with 0.9% financing on your favorite Hondas. Or get payments from $209 a month. There has never been a better time to trade for a new Honda. Get more for your trade now than ever before. Save on best-selling Hondas today. With 0.9% financing or payments from $209 a month. Trade today at Ron Norris Honda and Space Coast Honda.
He meant so much to so many people.
Welcome back, everyone. This is our breaking news. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, condemning what he calls an unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces on Ukraine. The president putting out a statement just a short time ago, and I'm going to quote him here. He's saying that President Putin has chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic loss of life and human suffering. Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction this attack will bring. And the United States and its allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. The world will hold Russia accountable. And just minutes after the Russian President Vladimir Putin announced what he called a military operation to protect Donbass, minutes later, CNN's teams began hearing explosions in multiple cities across Ukraine, including Kyiv. Take a look.
Ukrainians who resist. Oh, I tell you what, I just heard a big bang right here behind me. I thought we shouldn't have done the live shot here. There are big explosions taking place in Kiev.
CNN's teams are covering every single angle of this breaking news for you. There you just saw Matthew Chance. He is in Kyiv. Clarissa Ward is in Kharkiv. Caitlin Collins joins us from the White House. Our Jill Doherty is in Moscow. Frederick Pleitgen is in Belgorod, the Belgorod region of Russia. And Jim Sciutto joins us from Lviv in Ukraine. Hello to all of you. Jim, I'm going to start with you. I understand you have some new reporting tonight about what the U.S. is saying. What do you know?
That's right, Don. According to the early U.S. intelligence assessments of what we're seeing and witnessing now in Ukraine, that the headline that the invasion has begun, that these attacks we're seeing are part of that invasion plan by Russia. The explosions in Kyiv, the capital, and Odessa in the south, according to the early assessments, are likely missile attacks. The explosions seen and observed by our teams there in Kharkiv in the northeast of the country, more likely to be artillery. That makes sense, given Kharkiv's close distance from the Russian border there, would be within artillery range. Odessa further afield, as is the capital, Kyiv. Again, that's the early U.S. intelligence assessments. We should note, as we've been reporting for a number of weeks, it has been the U.S. view that the Russian battle plan would begin with what has sometimes been referred to as a shock and awe campaign, but would begin with an aerial element, missiles, artillery, the possibility at least of aerial bombardment. We reported just a few days ago that some 500 Russian fighters and fighter bombers have been deployed within range of Ukraine. A good percentage of Russians, medium to heavy bombers as well. But big picture, that the U.S. military believes Russia is now enacting its comprehensive battle plan, and that those explosions that we are seeing in those cities are part of that Russian invasion.
Jim, I want you to stand by. I want to get now to CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh, who is joining us now. He is in Odessa. Nick, Jim mentioned the explosions and what you're hearing in Odessa. Talk to us. What's going on?
Yeah, Don, I mean, you're getting the sun rising slightly here, and we heard in the last half an hour, I would say probably a total of 3 or 4 blasts, relatively distant compared to the central part of Odessa that I'm in. There's the port just over here as well. And so it was quite hard to assess exactly what those booms may have been targeting because of the distance they were at. 2, I think, woke me about 20 minutes ago. And so the question really is, are we seeing something beginning in the regions around Odessa, or were those blasts specifically aimed at targets, and this was limited? But to point out the importance of here, Don, this is the strategic port city for Ukraine on the Black Sea. It's third largest city, predominantly Russian speaking, and possibly many have been concerned that in the worst case scenario could be a target for some sort of amphibious landing to establish control of the sort of vital part of Ukraine's economy. But I should just stress what we've heard so far, 3 to 4 explosions, distant it seemed from where we are here in the city centre near the port, but clearly something unfolding around Odessa as well, as it does across the rest of Ukraine, Don.
Yeah, at 6:06 in the morning, the sun will be coming in soon. I would imagine, because it's just happened, Nick, no response from the folks there on the ground in Odessa. And I would imagine you haven't had a chance yet to even venture out to get a response.
No, to be honest, we're waking people up with the news at the moment to get them aware of what may be happening here. As I say, it is still limited what we are hearing so far and what we can pass on to you, but certainly would suggest that Odessa is not excluded from whatever has been Vladimir Putin's plan. And I have to say, hearing the news of what we're hearing unfold here, it seemed preposterous, frankly, when it was first suggested by Western intelligence officials in the previous months that Vladimir Putin, who so many have thought was a comparatively rational actor on the world stage, might launch into something that at this stage appears to be a multi-pronged attack on different cities across Ukraine. And quite what the extent of his ambitions are, we don't know at this point, but it is deeply troubling to have this worst version of the Russian president quite possibly enacting whatever we're about to see in the days ahead, not just for Ukraine, but for what that means for his interactions with the rest of Europe and for the years ahead, Don.
All right. I want you to stand by Nick Payton-Walsh. And again, this is all happening, all coming in real time, and you're getting the information just as we are getting it here, certainly as I am getting it here at CNN headquarters. I want to get back now to CNN's Jim Sciutto. Jim, I understand you have some new reporting. I also have something here. Perhaps you can respond to it. There's a CNN team saying that they're hearing jets overhead and also that there has been a restriction of airspace to civilian aircraft.
Mm-hmm. Well, first to that point, Don, because the U.S. assessment leading into this had been that the first phase would be something along the lines of shock and awe. Of course, we remember that phrase from the U.S. invasion of Iraq, but a similar combination of missile strikes, artillery strikes, in this case, given Russia's proximity to Ukraine, being within range, but also aerial bombardment. So if confirmed, the idea of jets in the sky and airspace closed fits in with the U.S. assessment of what that plan would be. The other point to make is this. There had been some speculation in recent days after Russia's recognition of those supposed breakaway republics in eastern Ukraine, which actually are, frankly, part of Ukrainian territory as far as international law is concerned, but that there had been some speculation that Putin might limit his ambitions to that section of the east. The U.S. assessment had been that his plans extended far beyond that. And what we're seeing tonight, early on, again, we should state, because things are moving in the moment, but what we're seeing early on is that the plan extends beyond the east. When you're targeting cities, including the capital, Kyiv, Odessa, really in the central southern part of the country, and Kharkiv, by the way, which is outside of those, again, quote-unquote, breakaway republics, that is an attack on really all of Ukraine, right? Not just the portions of Ukraine that Putin claims to be independent territory now. And that had been really the worst-case scenario, right? That this was a plan designed to crush Ukraine as a whole. And when you hear the Russian president tonight use terms such as demilitarize, but also denazify, again, based on a false claim that somehow the country is running rampant with neo-Nazis, you see the president creating at least the rhetorical justification, it seems, for a broader military plan. I've been covering this since going back to November when I got the first warnings that this was what Russia was preparing for. When I first heard those assessments, it was eye-opening. You had to question, would the Russian president go that far? Tonight we're seeing that perhaps he is.
No. Jim Sciutto, I want you to stand by. Jim Sciutto joining us from Lviv, where he has been reporting from this on this. I just want to tell folks what's happening here. We're getting reports of explosions from our folks on the ground in several different cities in Ukraine, and also from our Frederick Pleitgen, who is on the Russian side of the border in the Belgorod region. I also want to get to CNN's Matthew Chance, because Jim Sciutto mentioned what's happening in Kyiv, and we should say near Kyiv, because their reports are not confirming that these explosions that we're hearing are necessarily in Kyiv, but near Kyiv. Also getting information, Matthew, that perhaps you can respond to. I told Jim Sciutto about the jets being heard overhead. He talked about that, and that Ukraine has restricted airspace to civilian aircraft. But also Ukraine's foreign minister tweeting out just moments ago that Putin has just launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Peaceful Ukrainian cities are under strikes. This is a war of aggression. Ukraine will defend itself and will win. The world can and must stop Putin. The time to act is now. Ukraine is still defiant.
Absolutely. And that message from Dmytro Kuleba, the foreign minister of this country, is frankly, it's the words that we've been hearing from them for many months now when it comes to the threat that Russia poses, calling for concerted international action to stop Vladimir Putin in his tracks. They wanted sanctions to be imposed, before this happened, in order to prevent Putin from launching this kind of attack. And they wanted more weaponry so that they could defend themselves from this kind of attack. They didn't get as much as they wanted. They didn't get the sanctions before this. And so now I think those calls for more sanctions and more weaponry, though, are going to be heard much more clearly by the United States and by the international community. I just want to go on to some of these explosions, because we've counted about 12 or 13 at least salvos of what we're told are cruise missiles that have been fired at targets in and around Kiev. We're right in the center of the Ukrainian capital, and we haven't seen anything in this immediate vicinity. It's a historic area. There's some beautiful architecture here. The foreign ministry is just a couple of hundred yards away from where I'm standing right now. So it's really the official center of the city. But what we are seeing, and what the indications are, is that those explosions, for the most part, that we've been hearing, seem to be located near the airports, Borispil Airport, which is the main international airport in this city. It's to the east over there, about 20 miles away. And it's there where we're told command and control centers, surface-to-air missile systems, things like that may have been targeted by these multiple cruise missile attacks. And within the past few minutes, we've seen the direction of the attacks, if you like, change from the eastern location over here to this area right behind me here, which is basically north. It's north over here. And there's another airport about, again, 21 or so miles away from here, still just on the outskirts of, the city, as airports tend to be. And that there have also been explosions around that area as well. We can't confirm it's actually the airport, but it would make sense, because it would seem that what is happening right now in the Ukrainian capital is that cruise missiles, which are of course guided by GPS, are being used to target the airstrips, being used to target the command and control centers around those airports, and possibly to disable whatever military aircraft, and it's not that many, frankly, that the Ukrainian Air Force have. Why would they want to be doing that? Well, there's very intense cloud cover at the moment here in Kiev. Very hard for manned aircraft to target effectively the kinds of buildings or exact targets they might want to. But what it might be doing, this is coming from our security advisors here, it's speculative, but it's a possibility. They might be trying to clear the way to neutralize the air defense systems, to make sure that any sort of defense aircraft that the Ukrainians have are neutralized, in preparation for, when the skies clear, manned aerial attacks. That may be something that they may be planning in the future, which could be more targeted and pinpoint specific buildings. I'm talking about the various administration buildings here, the government, to cut off the command and control centers. Obviously, the government buildings are here, the defense ministry, the police headquarters, the head of the main headquarters for military intelligence. They're all here. And I think the concern is that we may just be at the start of a much broader attack on the Ukrainian capital. Of course, Vladimir Putin said he'd launched a special operation in Donbass, but it is obviously not just limited to Donbass, because we are hundreds of miles here in the capital, Kiev, away from that eastern part of the country. And we are seeing multiple attacks, at least 13 salvos we've been counting since we've been on air at CNN, and each of those salvos with multiple explosions at various locations around the city. And as I say, it could be just the start, Don.
Yeah, and we saw just the start of it just moments ago as you were reporting live here about an hour or so ago on CNN, just over an hour ago. Matthew, I want you to stand by when we get to now to our Clarissa Ward, who is in Kharkiv. Clarissa, you heard Matthew talking about, this was supposed to be an operation, according to Vladimir Putin, that was protective of Donbass, but we're getting reports from at least 7 cities from people, our folks on the ground, and also residents who are hearing explosions. And the European aviation regulators are warning that planes could be shot down over Ukraine. This operation seems to be in full force now, at least the start of it.
It certainly does. And, you heard President Putin, as you mentioned, say that this is all about Donbass. Well, he also said his stated goal was to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. So clearly he has much greater ambitions. We're also not on the front lines with Donbass here in Kharkiv. We've just heard another boom in the distance. There was a steady stream for a couple of minutes after President Putin made his announcement. And since then, we've heard sporadic, what sounds like indirect fire coming from the north. We also saw a surveillance jet up above at one stage, and we've heard a couple more booms just in the last 10 minutes or so. So this is clearly just the beginning. The question is, what is it the beginning of? And the reality is nobody really seems to know yet. And certainly here on the ground, as people are waking up, they're waking up to a very different country and a very frightening reality. And there isn't a clear sense of what people here in the city of Kharkiv, 1.4 million people, are supposed to do. Are they supposed to evacuate? Because this city is actually uniquely vulnerable. You have a huge buildup of Russian forces just on the other side of the border. You've heard our Fred Pleiken, who's been reporting from there, hearing a sort of steady stream of outgoing artillery. And we know that troops have continued to mass along with heavy weaponry and armor. So the question is, do we start to see some kind of a ground invasion? Is this a sort of prelude to that as they go about softening military targets? An Interior Ministry advisor told CNN that they believe the strikes here that we've been hearing around Kharkiv are military targets. We don't know exactly what they are yet. I assume we'll get a better sense now that the day is beginning as to what the targets were. But there are real questions now as to what to do with the people who live here, because this could quite quickly become isolated or cut off if indeed we do start to see a more forceful incursion coming in involving Russian ground forces as well as cruise missiles and indirect fire.
All right, Clarissa, I want you to stand by. We'll get back to Clarissa as well as Matthew Chance and our other folks who are there in Ukraine. I want to get now to our Caitlin Collins, who is joining us from the White House. Caitlin, the president releasing a statement. I understand you have some new reporting, but releasing a statement just a short time ago, and I quote here, President Putin has chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic loss of life and human suffering. Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction this attack will bring, and the United States and its allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. The world will hold Russia accountable. Caitlin, at the White House, what more do you have for us?
Yeah, and when it says holding Russia accountable, we will hear from President Biden on this tomorrow. He said he'll make those announcements for what exactly they are going to do. My colleague Phil Mattingly is reporting that tomorrow afternoon we should expect President Biden to come out and announce those full sanctions that he has been talking about for weeks now, saying that they would have those ready to go if you saw what we are seeing tonight and what our colleagues are reporting tonight that's happening inside Ukraine. And so we don't have all of the specifics of exactly what those sanctions are going to look like. We know that the president, his team have called them severe and said that they will be swiftly imposed on Russia. So we should expect President Biden to detail that tomorrow. Don, expect it to be about banks, export controls when it comes to technology. President Biden himself has said maybe there will be sanctions on President Putin personally after, of course, they have threatened to go after his inner circle, concerned about where he stores his wealth. And so you will see those sanctions laid out in detail by the White House tomorrow. Of course, we know those are the sanctions that the White House has been threatening for weeks, saying that they believed they would hopefully deter President Putin. Clearly, he does view this decision as an emotional one, as a historical one. The White House has talked about how bizarre and chilling they found his speech that he gave recently that is driving these actions that he has tonight. And so people will be standing by to watch that. But so we will hear from President Biden on this tomorrow. And Don, we should note that he said tonight he and the First Lady are praying for the people of Ukraine who are waking up to this horrible news that's being reported this morning.
I want you to stand by at the White House. So we have our Jill Doherty with us, who's in Moscow. We're going to get to CNN's Jill Doherty. I want you to respond, please, Jill, if you will, to what the White House is saying. The president said that Russia alone is responsible for this bloodshed. And you heard Caitlin say they were hoping that these sanctions would be a deterrent. Obviously, they are not. At this point, we are beyond sanctions being a deterrent. Can you hear me, Jill?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Go on, please.
Obviously, you know, the president, the Russian president is not talking about sanctions. This is, as we get more and more of the translation, this is a very angry speech, and it's directed not only at Ukraine, it's also directed at NATO. He says that NATO supports those neo-Nazis. And he goes back into history about Crimea, et cetera. But I think two really important things. He is actually directly talking to the Ukrainian army and saying that you don't follow the criminal orders coming from the Ukrainian government. I urge you to lay down your weapons immediately and go home. And he says, let me make it clear that all servicemen, if they do this, they will be left in peace. But then this really chilling warning at the end, where he says anyone from the outside who's tempted to interfere in ongoing events, whoever tries to interfere with us, and even more so to create threats for our country, that would be Russia, and for our people, should know that Russia's response will be immediate and will lead you to such consequences that you have never experienced in your history. So that is really a blood-chilling threat. And it sounds like it's a threat to the outside world, to NATO or to the United States, who might want to intervene to stop this. So this is really extraordinary. And Don, I go back to, and this is just, impression. He is wearing, in this speech, he is wearing the very same tie, the very same suit, and sitting in the very same position that he was in on Monday when he gave that very long speech. And just raising the question, could he have actually recorded this on Monday? It is now Wednesday night, going into Thursday. It could be that this was all planned, even, obviously it's been planned, but maybe even this was planned for a couple of days ago.
All right, Jill, I want you to stand by, and perhaps you can help me out with this conversation. I want to bring our Jim Sciutto. Jim, Jill is reporting on what the Russian president said earlier, and I want to talk about the Ukrainian ambassador, because there's this meeting late at the United Nations Security Council, and I want to respond to what the Ukrainian ambassador is saying. He's saying it's too late to speak about de-escalation, that the UNSC needs to help stop this war. He said it was the responsibility of this body to stop the war. The Russian ambassador responding to him saying, this isn't war, this is a special military operation in Donbass.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the evidence before our eyes and through our ears this evening is that it is not just an operation in Donbass because of those explosions witnessed in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, or just outside, as we saw Matthew Chance reporting, and in Odessa. And as I reported just a few minutes ago, that it is the early U.S. assessment that those explosions were part of a broader invasion plan. By the way, Kharkiv as well, in the northeast of the country, is outside of those supposedly independent republics as declared and by Russian-backed separatists and recognized just in the last couple of days by the Russian president. So again, let's remember with the Russian president, perhaps listen to what he says, but believe what you see with your own eyes or hear with your own ears. I will say again, as the U.S. is watching this and watching this very closely, at this point, I'm told there has not yet been observation of Russian ground forces going in. Again, this is early, but that it is still the expectation, the U.S. intelligence assessment, that is part of a broader invasion plan. Of course, as with all these steps, it remains to be seen what happens, what Putin orders. But again, from the beginning, going back months, frankly, the U.S. assessment of Russian plans had been to begin with an air assault, missiles, artillery, aerial bombardment, soften the battlefield, you might want to say, and then follow with a ground force. The other point I would make is this, Don, and you've covered on your broadcast, and CNN has been covering this for some weeks now, that it is the belief of the U.S. and NATO intelligence assessments that part of the plan as well is to install friendly, in effect, government officials, right, to remove those who were elected by the Ukrainian people serving those positions and replace them with people friendly to Putin and his government. A comprehensive military and political plan. Again, that's the assessment. Our job here is to watch what we see with our own eyes and see what comes to be. But the early signs tonight foreboding.
Vladimir Putin has been doing what we say, throwing rocks and hiding his hands, also just using doublespeak, saying we're not invading, this is a peace, we're sending a peace team in there, peacekeepers in, when it's clearly was sending in military equipment and assets. To your point about what you said about Vladimir Putin and what he's saying and what he's doing with his cronies, the Russian Federation ought to relinquish the responsibilities of the president of the Security Council and yield to another member of the council that is respectful of the UN's charter. So the Ukrainian ambassador there really not happy with how the UN is handling this, and especially not happy with the Russian ambassador, Jim.
Yeah. You know, Don, to that point, this idea of peacekeeping forces, again, let's talk about reality rather than Putin's claims here. This was a peaceful country before this started. I was in Kyiv, I'm in Lviv. We have CNN colleagues all around the country in cities that before tonight were more peaceful than he claims them to be now. And we do know, and again, this was part of the U.S. and NATO assessment going in, that false flag operations, that there would be disinformation, that there would be claims of attacks by Ukrainians on ethnic Russians in the Donbass or perhaps even across the border in Russia. And we saw those claims, but you know, the fact is that they really fell on deaf ears because many of them were so obviously false. That's what Putin is blaming this on, right? Claiming the justification is due to those threats. Those threats were by and large just frankly not true. So when you hear peacekeeping from him, well, there was peace, and there appears to be peace no longer.
Yeah. Jim Sciutto, I want you to stand by. This is happening in the moment, and no one is more in the moment than our Matthew Chance, who is in Kyiv. And just a short time ago, Matthew was giving his live report when he started to hear explosions near Kyiv. He is on the same balcony that he was on earlier, and I understand you have some new reporting. What are you seeing and what are you hearing, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, Don, it's been pretty noisy here for the past, half an hour or so. We've been hearing more, volleys of explosions, this time coming from the north of the city, which is in this direction. Now it's getting a bit lighter, so we can get a bit more visibility on what's going on. About 20 miles from here, towards the north, there is a military air base called the Vasilkiv Air Base, and it's where fighter jets and interceptor jets of the Ukrainian military are based. And what the Interior Ministry is telling us now is that many of the cruise missiles that have been fired at Kiev by Russia over the course of the past hour or so have been targeting those military jets, that military air base about 20 miles away to the north, the Borispil airport as well, which is the main international airport, which also has a military component, and surface-to-air missiles, for instance, there. That's also been targeted. But it all points to this. I mean, we don't know what he's up to exactly, Vladimir Putin, what the Russians are up to, but it all points to this idea that they are neutralizing Ukraine's air defenses, trying to. And Ukraine's air defenses aren't very substantial, it has to be said. They've got very old aircraft. They don't have very sophisticated anti-aircraft weaponry. But what they have got, it seems, is now being taken out by these cruise missiles attacks. And we've counted, I think, 15, 16 volleys so far, each with multiple explosions in different parts of the city, to the east towards the international airport, to the south, and now, of course, I've just been explaining to the north as well. Now, why they would be taking out these air defences? Obviously, the first reason would be to, make sure that Russia has air superiority, that Ukraine can't launch surface-to-air missiles against Russian planes that may soon come in the sky, and also can't launch air assaults on ground forces, perhaps in Donbass, which I say is several hundreds of miles away, and which Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, says is the focus of his special military operation, as he calls it. It's not being called that by Ukrainian officials. They're calling this the start of a full-scale invasion, and there are concerns this morning as the sun starts to rise and the street lights have just gone off here in the Ukrainian capital. There are concerns this is just the start of something much, much bigger, a much broader invasion. It's been said by the United States in their intelligence assessments that have been passed on to Ukrainian officials that it's not just going to be airstrikes. It will also be the whole range of military tactics, cyber warfare, psychological warfare, possibly the deployment of ground forces as well. That might be one reason why these airstrips, these airports are being targeted. Why would they want to do that? Well, I mean, it's unclear. We're getting into the realms of speculation, but, I can tell you that what many people thought, what I thought, actually, was unthinkable just a couple of hours ago is now starting to unfold. And, you know, it's not just going to be me that thinks that. There are 2.8 million people in the Ukrainian capital, and I haven't spoken to any of them yet, but I can imagine how alarmed, how terrified they're going to be hearing these explosions, in some cases shaking them out of their beds this morning, Don.
Matthew Chance, thank you very much. You can see the sun is coming up in Ukraine, where Matthew Chance is, and several of our reporters throughout the region in Ukraine, on the Ukrainian side and the Russian side of the border, deep into the evening here in the United States. And there it is. You see it on your screen, a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, according to the foreign minister in Ukraine, and also U.S. sources saying the U.S. assessment here is that the Russian invasion of Ukraine has begun. The worldwide resources of CNN will continue right after this break.
Can you be free of hair breakage worries? We invited Maho to see for herself that Dove Breakage Remedy gives damaged hair the strength it needs. Even with repeated combing, hair treated with Dove shows 97% less breakage. Strong hair with Dove Breakage Remedy.
#1 beauty brand not tested on animals.
Angie's List is now Angie, and it's easier than ever to get your projects done right. With Angie, you can connect with top pros and see ratings and reviews. And when you book and pay through Angie, you're covered by our happiness guarantee. Check out Angie.com today. Angie, and done.
NyQuil Severe gives you powerful relief for your worst cold and flu symptoms. On Sunday night and every night. NyQuil Severe, the nighttime sniffling, sneezing, coughing, aching, stuffy head, best sleep with a cold medicine.
Do you struggle with occasional nerve aches in your hands or feet? Try Nervive Nerve Relief from the world's #1 selling nerve care company. Nervive contains alpha-lipoic acid to relieve occasional nerve aches, weakness, and discomfort. Try Nervive Nerve Relief.
With the timeless protection of ADT, it's safe to say,
you'll all sleep like a baby.
that's perfect. Or it's safe to say,
you're all set.
It's even safe to say,
we're here for you 24/7.
with amazing employees like these, it's safe to say, nobody has more experience helping keep you safe than ADT.
Hello, how can I... Sore throat pain? Try Vicks VapoCool Drops in Honey Lemon Chill for fast-acting sore throat relief. Woo! Vaporize sore throat pain with Vicks VapoCool Drops.
I've traveled every road in this here land. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I travel, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. I've been to Pittsburgh, Parkersburg, Gravelburg, Colorado, Ellen City, Cedar City, Dodge City, what a pity. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere.
We're back now with our breaking news. The invasion of Ukraine has begun. That is according to the Ukrainian Interior Minister and also sources for the United States saying a full-scale invasion by Russia of Ukraine has begun. Also have some breaking news. I want to get to CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh in Odessa. Nick, the information I'm getting is that troops have landed in Odessa, crossing the border in Kharkiv. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Kharkiv is far out east, but here in the southern central port city of Odessa, you're right that the Interior Minister has said troops have landed here. Now, I have to tell you, from our vantage point in the centre of the port city, we've not heard information to necessarily support that, but I would obviously imagine the Interior Minister knows more about what's going on than we do here. We have heard in the last 10 minutes 2 distant thuds. Doesn't seem like they were from much of the city centre here, and that's in addition to 3 or 4 explosions we heard about an hour or so ago now. So clearly something is happening around this key vital port city. It is essentially Ukraine's access to the Black Sea, to the outside maritime world, a key place that you would imagine that if we are dealing with the wider scale nightmare version of the Vladimir Putin operation that Western officials have talked about, that might be within Russian crosshairs at the moment. And certainly the blasts we've heard, as I say, it seemed distant from the city centre here. About 5 or 6 of them at this point would seem to support that something is occurring in the outskirts of the city at this time. But the sun has risen here, Don, on an incredibly calm place. We are waking up locals here to tell them at times the news of what has happened. And so certainly not a panic yet in this town, but it is a place that had police
Nick,
on the streets in larger numbers last night because of this state of emergency.
Nick, I hate to interrupt you. I need to get to Nick is in Odessa. I need to get back to Matthew Chance. Matthew, I understand that you're hearing explosions and a report of casualties. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, Don, I mean, look, I'm going to bring you those reports in a minute, but there's been some really, really loud explosions when you were talking to Nick just a minute ago, much closer, just to the east of us here, you know, really feeling the vibrations. So obviously, you know, the vibrations, obviously those attacks, those missile strikes coming in much closer. And here's the sort of news that we've got from your defense officials saying that this is now, and this is a quote I'm getting from the president's office at the moment, a full-blown nationwide attack with military infrastructure that is being attacked nationwide. So the emphasis being on the military infrastructure that they say is coming under attack. We've also spoken to, again, our contact at the Interior Ministry, an Interior Ministry official, saying that across the country, as a result of these attacks, there are hundreds of casualties. Now, we don't know how many of those people are dead, how many are injured, or whether that figure is accurate, but we do know that the Interior Ministry of Ukraine is putting the number of casualties so far in this nationwide assault, missile assault at this stage, for the most part, in the hundreds, which is, you know, I mean, incredibly alarming, obviously, if it's indeed accurate. But, you know, I can tell you, we've heard about, you know, 18, 19 salvos of cruise missile attacks in just this city, in the capital, Kiev, within the past hour or so, since we've been talking to you here on CNN. And those attacks have been focused on, it seems, the air infrastructure here. There may have been other locations targeted as well, but definitely a couple of airports have been targeted. We've seen images of Borispil Airport, the main international airport that's been attacked. There will be surface-to-air missile stations there and military personnel stationed there. But then there's that Vasilkiv air base, about 20 miles to the north, where we have heard multiple strikes taking place over the course of the past 15 or 20 minutes. And there's going to be quite a few soldiers, quite a few, you know, military personnel, rather, that are located there. Not just the pilots, but also the crews and the technical staff that go with that. And so we're trying to get some more clarity on that. But again, the Interior Ministry of Ukraine saying that nationwide there are hundreds of casualties as a result of these Russian missile attacks, Don.
All right, I want you to stand by Matthew Chance. Obviously, a lot coming in. This is all happening in the moment. Again, it's all breaking. We're getting it just as it's happening here. I'm getting some information that there's some news from the White House. I'm going to get back to CNN's Caitlin Collins joining us from the White House in Washington, D.C. Caitlin, the president speaking earlier, new information about the response to this invasion. What do you have?
Yeah, we'll hear from President Biden in person tomorrow around noon, Dawn. That is what we were told by the White House. Remember, he's got that call with G7 leaders here at the White House in the meeting that was already scheduled in advance. It's a virtual call. Of course, the subject was what is happening in Ukraine. And now that things have changed, that is certainly going to be at the forefront. We are also told that tonight, President Biden is expected to speak with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Obviously, he is in Kyiv. He delivered that heartfelt plea just a few hours ago, speaking in Russian for most of it, making this direct appeal and trying to push back on a lot of the lies that have been spread by President Putin over the last several weeks. And so President Biden is expected to speak to President Zelensky. Of course, this is coming at a terrible time for the Ukrainian leader. In the middle of what Matthew Chance is reporting is what's happening in Kyiv. We should expect to get a White House readout afterward of what it was that was discussed between the two of them. And Don, remember, it was just a few weeks ago, or a few days ago, actually, that my colleague Natasha Bertrand and I reported that White House officials had discussions privately with the Ukrainian president about basically preparing a contingency plan if what is happening now was going to happen. If Russia was going to go in and attack Ukraine in the way that we are seeing happen right now, about President Zelensky potentially leaving Kyiv and maybe going to another city, one closer to the Polish border. Now, that doesn't mean that that is in any way something that President Zelensky is planning to do, but it does give you some insight into the way that White House officials have been approaching this and how they've been preparing for this and thinking about what the backup plan is going to be if something like what we are seeing right now is happening. And so, of course, we're waiting on this conversation between President Biden and President Zelensky to happen, and we will hear from President Biden tomorrow when he announces that full raft of sanctions that he has been promising would happen if Russia did what they are doing tonight.
All right, Caitlin Collins, I want you to stand by, as well as the rest of our correspondents who are actually on the ground in Ukraine, also in Russia. That was Caitlin joining us from the White House. I want to get now to Senator Ben Cardin, who has been sitting by very patiently listening to all of this unfold. We appreciate your patience. He joins us this evening from Florida. So we heard from the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and then shortly thereafter, the explosions were heard and felt by our correspondents who were there on the ground. Shortly after, the President of the United States releasing a statement, and then the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry as well, Interior Ministry, I should say, releasing statements. Your assessment of what's going on in Ukraine?
Well, Don, this march to war has been transparently exposed hour by hour. So what we're seeing is not a surprise, but it doesn't diminish the tragedy of the moment. What Mr. Putin has done, this unprovoked attack on Ukraine, the tragedies that will be on the casualties that we're going to see, this is just an unprovoked invasion of sovereignty of a country. So we've seen it unfold. We know exactly what's happening. And Mr. Putin is continuing to use his propaganda and lies in order to justify this grab of territory. And there is no justification for it. And I can tell you there'll be strong bipartisan support in the United States Senate and Congress for the strongest possible reaction by the United States and our allies.
I wonder what you make of this. This is just into CNN. According to our Caitlin Collins and our producer Kevin Liptak, President Biden and President Zelensky are currently speaking. That's according to a White House official. What's to be done at this moment for both men?
We know the United States and our allies have provided the weapons and equipment to the Ukrainians to help defend themselves. We recognize the lack of balance on the military capacity of Ukraine and Russia, but we do know the Ukrainian people are tough people. They're going to stand up for their independence. They're going to protect their country, and we got to make sure that we're on their side. We can help. And I think the supplying of equipment and the strong sanctions that will be imposed and the fact that it will not be business as usual for Mr. Putin. We need to organize the international communities to support Ukraine in its effort to maintain its sovereignty. Make no mistake about it. Russia's desire, Mr. Putin's desire, go well beyond Ukraine and has a direct impact on the security of Europe and the United States national security. So we need to stand with the people of Ukraine.
Okay, so what is, Senator, what indication that you have, I haven't seen any, perhaps you can, you have, that that Putin will abide by any sanctions, that sanctions will be a deterrent in any way? The President of the United States, Joe Biden, has been saying he's going to increase sanctions. They're going to be harsher. They're going to be stronger. Still, what it all has led to is an invasion of Ukraine. At this point, is there anything you believe will get Vladimir Putin's attention?
Well, the cost will be reflected in the performance of the Russian economy, and the support for Mr. Putin's criminal-type activities will be reflected by these sanctions. So it will have pressure on the government itself. We're talking about cutting off Russia from the international banks. We're talking about personal sanctions against those that are closest to Mr. Putin, who support his illegal activities, these oligarchs that supply the resources for Mr. Putin, and perhaps even sanctions against Mr. Putin himself. So we are talking about the strongest possible way that will make it more difficult for Mr. Putin to perform for his country. There'll be a heavy price to pay. It will go into the equation. The only way that he'll get relief is if he backs off this invasion. So we recognize that Mr. Putin does things, and sometimes sanctions won't stop him from doing it. We've seen this before. We need to be very strong, and we need to be resolved that this may take some time, but we got to stand with the people of Ukraine. Mr. Zelensky has asked for these sanctions. The international community needs to speak with a strong voice.
I'm wondering if you have, I know that you have been here watching and waiting, but I'm wondering if you have been briefed on what is happening. Senator Marco Rubio is tweeting this, and I want you to respond to it. To clarify what is underway is full-scale comprehensive military assault throughout Ukraine. Airborne and amphibious landings, missile strikes from air, ground, and naval forces, electronic and cyber attacks, and a large ground force to occupy a large swath of territory. What's your response to that? Have you been briefed on this?
Well, we've been briefed regularly throughout this process. As I said, we've had transparency hour by hour as to what we expect Mr. Putin to be doing. So a lot of what we're seeing happening in regards to the apparent air attacks on the defense issues, infrastructure of Ukraine was all part of what was expected we would see. So, yes, we've been briefed as to what to expect. There will be a senator's briefing tomorrow that we will be participating in with the White House, so we will be getting a full briefing tomorrow to update us as to the current plans. But this administration, the Biden administration, has been briefing us almost on a daily basis, giving us information on a daily basis to the members of the Senate. So we're fully aware of what was transpiring.
I'm just getting more information as to what you were saying, and this is from our Manu Raju. All House members will receive an unclassified briefing call on Thursday at 6:30 p.m., according to a source familiar. The briefing is expected to be at this briefing, I should say. Briefers are expected to be the Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, the Chairman Milley, and Secretary Yellen. This comes as the Senate is having an unclassified briefing. I imagine this is the one that you're talking about at 5 o'clock on Thursday. They are unclassified, these briefings that we're hearing, because members are back in their home districts and states during the President's Day recess. Can you confirm?
Well, I think that's accurate. As I said, we've been informed there will be a briefing tomorrow. The information you have is accurate. It will be unclassified, but I will tell you this. A lot of the information has been made available to the public in an effort to counter what we knew would be propaganda by Mr. Putin and trying to blame everybody but himself for this invasion. So we expect that we will continue to be very transparent so that the world understands one person and one person alone is responsible for this tragedy, and that's Mr. Putin. Now we need to stand strong. I expect tomorrow we'll hear about the specific sanctions and the cooperation Senator, we're receiving from other countries.
Thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate you standing by patiently until we got to you this evening. Thank you so much. I need to get back now to Kyiv, though, in Ukraine. We'll have you back soon. I want to get to Matthew Chance. Matthew, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah, hi Don. Yeah, so it's we've just over the past few seconds, I don't know whether you caught that, but we've just seen a couple of helicopters fly across the horizon there, coming from the direction of that military base, which we mentioned to you. You can hear some thuds as well, still going off in the background. It is very, very noisy here indeed, I can tell you, and there are regular explosions that we're still hearing coming from the north of the city, which is just over there, right over in the east, and to the south as well. Just to remind you, obviously the light has come now, it's dawn has broken, thank heavens. So we've got a bit more clarity on what we can see ahead of us. You can see the visibility is, the cloud cover is quite low. Borispil Airport, the international airport over there. I know from my sources in the government that there are at least 5 explosions that have taken place at that international airport, targeting command and control centres, the surface-to-air missile system there, the defensive barrier that's been put up there, the other airbase up there, the military airbase to the north of the city, about 20 miles away. That's also come under repeated attack, according to the Ukrainian Interior Ministry. It's a place where military fighter jets are located. Clearly, the intention seems to be to take out the air capability, the air defences of Ukraine, to make sure that the Russians have complete air supremacy in the skies over Ukraine, so they can conduct the operations that they say they're going to conduct in Donbass, if those operations are not already underway. Of course, we are hundreds of miles from that location right now, here in the centre of Ukraine. That's right over in the east of Ukraine. I can hear some aircraft, helicopters, I think, in the skies now as well, but I can't see anyone right now, any of them right now. But yeah, no. So the situation is obviously incredibly tense. We don't know what's going to follow. There's been an announcement come from the authorities in Kiev, the city, telling residents not to panic. The panic is the main enemy, they say now. Telling people to stay indoors, but get a bag packed in case they need to flee, which is quite ominous, obviously. Only people involved in critical infrastructure jobs are being advised to go to work to make sure that the city still runs. But the truth is, nobody really knows at this point what Russia is up to. I mentioned last time we spoke about the casualty figures, the Interior Ministry telling us that there were hundreds of casualties across the country in this nationwide campaign, as they described it, against the military infrastructure of Ukraine. We don't know whether that figure is accurate. It's just what they have told us. But obviously, if it is true, that's very alarming. We're doing our best to try and sort of get some more clarity on that figure. But clearly, with so many barrages of cruise missiles being launched just at Kiev, and of course it's happening in other places in the country as well.
I want to get back to Clarissa.
The expectation is that
Matthew,
there will be casualties.
Clarissa, please go ahead.
In all of this.
Apparently, I must have lost. I lost Matthew. Clarissa, can you hear me?
You're live.
I can hear you. I can hear you, Don.
Yes, go on.
I don't know if you're able to hear that. We just had a steady stream of strikes. Went on for about 30 seconds or so, but it was a very steady stream. It had been quieter for a few minutes before that, and we know we sent one of our colleagues over to the bomb shelter. There is a public bomb shelter here. It's about 200 yards away. That bomb shelter is now open, and there are police there. There's no sign yet that people have turned up at that shelter, but that might change, obviously, throughout the course of the day if we continue to hear steady streams of strikes like those, because we are just over 20 miles from the border with Russia, and we have seen through images on Maxar satellite images, but also from the reporting of our own Fred Pleitgen, who's just on the other side, that there is a massive buildup of Russian weaponry and Russian troops just over in that Belgorod area. Also, our Fred Pleitgen was reporting earlier that he was hearing a lot of outgoing artillery. We've certainly been hearing quite a bit of that landing around this city of Kharkiv. It's a city of 1.4 million people. I'm just getting a little bit more information here. This is coming from the mayor of Kharkiv. It says, "Dear citizens, please do not leave your homes today. Due to the complicated situation, schools, kindergartens, other institutions will not be operational today until the situation becomes clearer. Public transport will work as usual, and I will keep you informed of what is happening and the actions of city authorities throughout the day." This was published on his Facebook page about 10 minutes there, but you see a pretty sternly worded message there for the 1.4 million residents of Kharkiv. This is the second largest city in Ukraine. The mayor coming out and telling people, don't leave your homes, don't go to work, don't send your children to school. It's been a very busy few hours since this all started, Don, and there is no sign at this stage that it is letting up. And while it's one thing to be hearing strikes like that, missile strikes, one can assume, it is quite another thing to see ground forces crossing. We haven't seen that yet, but that is certainly what people in this city, so close to that border, Don, will be bracing themselves for.
Clarissa, so you're saying it's sporadic? These strikes, as you say, sporadic, and then it is a barrage, and then it stops for a moment.
That's exactly right. At 5 in the morning, just after Putin gave his speech, we heard a barrage, a series of barrages. Then it was quiet for a while. Then it was sporadic. We heard indirect fire coming from the north, which is that way. That is the direction of the Russian border. And then just as we were coming onto air with you, we heard another barrage. What we don't know is what the target is. We've been led to believe by an advisor to the Interior Ministry that these are military targets, but the sun is only just rising here, so we're only just starting to get some kind of a picture. And you saw in that message, Don, that I read out from the mayor of Kharkiv, even the picture does not really seem to be very clear to them yet. And I think it's important to remind our viewers here that up until this moment, there has still been this underlying conviction that many Ukrainians have shared that President Putin would not actually go through with this, that he would not actually launch this kind of a military campaign. Because as Putin himself has said, Don, the people of Ukraine and Russia are deeply connected spiritually, historically, familially. There's millions of Ukrainians and Russians living in each other's countries. These people are not enemies, per se, at all. And so I think people are shocked, frankly, to see that this is actually happening now. And they continue to brace themselves to see what comes next. Is it going to be more of these strikes targeting presumably primarily military installations, or could it ratchet up even further? We just don't know yet, Don.
Clarissa, while you're there, you're saying in Kharkiv, the mayor is saying remain calm. He wants people to stay at home, right, for safety. There have been several explosions around other Ukrainian towns, and they're currently calm, and people are actually going to work. So it's a tale of many different cities, depending on where you are.
It's a tale of many different cities, but I would say what we've all been struck by, Don, is just we have crews literally fanned out across this entire country, and almost everyone is hearing something in the place they are. Teams in Zaporozhye, Odessa, Kiev, of course, here in Kharkiv, and everybody is hearing something. So when President Putin talks about an operation to protect the people of Donbass, and he's trying, allegedly to talk about quite a narrow area of territory, what we're seeing is much wider and broader and deeper in scope than that. We're not near Donbass here. Matthew Chance in Kiev is nowhere near Donbass. And yet, here we are, a new dawn, a new day, reporting on Russian strikes here in Kharkiv and across the country.
All right. Thank you very much, Clarissa Ward. We appreciate it. Clarissa, we want you to stand by, as well as all of our correspondents throughout the region. CNN's teams are covering all of our breaking news. An advisor to Ukraine's Minister of the Interior saying that Russian troops have landed in Odessa. They are crossing the border near Kharkiv. President Biden spoke to Ukraine's president just tonight, and he'll also address the nation.